I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. I am excited for tonight's show because we have some really cool stories to discuss tonight. So welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. I want to give a shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. Oh, we are starting with breaking news. We have some breaking news tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that I never, ever thought that I would see happen, but it is big news. So quite a bit of things to discuss tonight. Tonight's themes is things can change. Things can change. And I think you're going to see that with the stories that we have tonight. I want to shout. I want to start off by giving shout outs to everyone in the chat. What's going on? I know myself. You can trust a gov named Slickback to respond to any threats to his name. In these streets, all a pimp got is his name. Someone's been watching the Boondocks. What's going on? Eyelash says, thank you. You're welcome. Greetings, Andre. I see black wages being discussed. I myself have fallen down the economic ladder. I'm sorry to hear that, Andre. Postponing school until I can get back on my feet. This is the second time I've slid down the ladder, and I've been there. So I know where you're coming from. That is a really good story we're going to discuss tonight. Shout out to Joe, says, should we be more mad those holding her nomination hostage or Tulsi for caving? That is going to be up to you. That's going to be up to you guys. We'll get to that story. Greetings, Dr. Darnell. Rachel Maddow on MSNBC will be on the air 5 times a week because of failing rankings. Independent media must turn up the heat. CNN and MSNBC must be off the air. Watch nonprofit independent news. I hear you on that one. Well, you knew that was coming, right? Greetings, CBC voter, says happy Tuesday, Sabby. Shout out to my comrade JB, says good evening all. I hope you have a serendipitous show, Sabs. I also hope you had some sensational tacos today on this Taco Tuesday. Say hello to your hubs for me and forehead kisses to all of y'all. I did not have tacos today. I had a salad for dinner, actually. Greetings, Kaimi, says good evening, fam. Let's roll that sweet doobie-doo music. Good evening, JB, Eric T. Red, and of course, the hostess with the mostest, Sabby Sabs. Welcome. Shout out to Leroy. Good day, comrades. Help in your community if you can. Even old items you may not be using could be a great benefit to our capitalism displaced sisters and brothers out there. That's right. And I'm seeing a number of mutual aid networks happen for people in Los Angeles, which is absolutely great. Greetings, New York. Varsity says, yo, Pierce was on some bigot nonsense with Lamont Hill. I haven't seen that one yet. I have to check that out, but that doesn't surprise me. Greetings, Hannah says, what up? Shout out to Patrick. Can't wait to hear what Sabby says about this ceasefire. If it happens, it'll show Biden let this genocide take place for no reason. Oh, I have some things to say, Patty Pat. Greetings, Lee says, tacos sound better than my ramen, JB. Hello, everybody. Tacos always sound great. I'm telling you. Put anything in a taco. Greetings, Crom says, peace, love, Sabby. What's up, Crom? Shout out to Terry, my comrade. Terry here is a part of the RBN Boston chapter. Terry says, hello, Sabby in chat. What's up? Greetings, Mark says, Sabby. Shout out to Lee says, ready. Greetings, Kira says, hi, friends. Shout out to Sebastian says, hey, y'all. And greetings, Joan says, hello, all. Hello. Chicago, what's up? Is this real life? Ceasefire. It is real life, Chicago. It is real life. I would not joke about something like that. Greetings B says, Sabby, hey, y'all, what's up? Shout out to KC, send solidarity and fire. Greetings Martin says, A. And shout out to Kelvin says, Sabby, you're the best. So thank you, Kelvin. And greetings Eric says, rocket. Okay. So many more in the chat. Sorry, I can't get to everybody, but I do want to get started. We have 6 stories to discuss tonight. We are going to do call in tonight instead of Thursday because one of these stories I'm pretty sure a lot of people do want to discuss. So we are going to do call in after the show tonight. So let's go ahead and get it started with a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much. Holding down the fort around here. Really appreciate you, fam. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. 5. Ultimates, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. Yeah. Don't forget about those Sabbies. They have been doing the damn thing, lining up like a unit, like a G. Thank you. And we also have members. Thank you guys so much for your support. And you can see all of their names listed here. And you can also see their names. Scrolling across the ticker. I knew something was missing. I forgot to put that up there. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate all of you, fam. And I can't wait to get started. I've been excited about this show all day because I'm like, oh my God, the stories are crazy. Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail so you can see what we are going to discuss tonight. Oh, buddy, we have some things to get into tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We are discussing, this is a pretty interesting, heated conversation. Crystal and Sagar clash over the LA wildfires. And I thought, like, Roger Meadows sent me this clip and he sent me another one and I chose this one. So there were two different episodes where they were clashing, but this one about the wildfires, I think it brings up some interesting points. Do you think Crystal or Sagar is correct with this conversation, or is it possible that both of them could be right at the same time? And that's what we're going to get into tonight. We're also going to discuss Tulsi Gabbard flips and people are losing their minds. I hate to say I told you so, folks, but I did forewarn you about Tulsi. I have been warning you about Tulsi for 3 years. Okay. For 3 years, I've been warning you. And she has now, I guess, played her hand. And a lot of the people that were, I guess, looking forward to her doing the right thing are very disappointed, at least online. We're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Gavin Newsom response to criticism about the LA wildfires. We have a couple of things to show you there, some comments that Gavin Newsom is making about what is going to happen to all of that land. And again, we find ourselves back in a similar situation as we did with Lahaina and as we have with, of course, Asheville, North Carolina. This is not a new thing. And I think some of the comments that Gavin Newsom made in those interviews is very revealing and should be alarming to people. We're going to get into that, as well as there is another fire that just started in the Los Angeles area as well. Probably one of the biggest stories tonight is going to be this one. Trump ceasefire deal. And I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. But honey, listen, I am willing to give credit where credit is due. I'm not one of those people who are melting down online right now because of the news that was released. So I'm willing to give credit where credit is due. We're going to get into all of that and what that is going to look like. And what does that mean about the Biden-Harris administration? We're also going to discuss, and this one, I've been waiting to talk about this, and the right video went viral online. Black wages revealed. So the woman there that's in that purplish square, she is a waitress. And we are going to get into what happened to Black wages, which connects it to Black wealth. We're going to get into that tonight. And last but not least, we do have to discuss the TikTok SCOTUS hearing, which started earlier today. By the time you see this clip tomorrow, it will be yesterday for you. But the TikTok SCOTUS hearing and what people are doing now, people are migrating away from TikTok and they're going to another app I'm going to tell you about. We're going to get into all of that, ladies and gentlemen, and we are going to do call in tonight. Start us off right by smashing the like. Bam, bam, bam. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Thank you guys so much. Quick update. I did publish a Substack article. I told you guys this year I was going to get back into writing a lot more. So I did publish a Substack article about Luigi and the healthcare situation. So if you're signed up, I think a good amount of you already read that article. But if you're signed up for my Substack, you'll definitely want to read that because it also gives you some advice as to what we should do next, right? So look forward to more of those. It's a free article. I haven't started paid articles yet. So I think I'm just going to do a couple of free ones, see how you guys like those. And then I may do one or two here that's like paid or something. But for the most part, most of them will be free. So that being said, we need to get started. So let's go ahead and get into the first story. Again, the theme for tonight's show is things can change. And we are seeing that, of course, with TikTok, an app that a lot of creators make a lot of money off of and have become full-time creators on this app, whether it's dance videos, whether it's news, short news segments, regardless of the content that they post. A number of creators here looks like might be out of a job, at least on TikTok. Because now what has happened is that Biden wanted to push this forward. Donald Trump said, let's give this a minute and let's pause on the TikTok decision. Not something he wanted to push this time around. He did want to push it in 2020. Again, things can change. But the Biden administration decided to be sneaky. They decided, I didn't win. Let me go ahead and ram that through. So they pushed it through. And now the decision and the fate of TikTok belongs to the Supreme Court. And that is where it is now. Nevertheless, don't forget where this all came from. I have to continue to remind people about this, that it was the ADL. They were the ones who had a serious concern about TikTok. Listen to this discussion here from Jonathan Greenblatt in Israel.
You must take this deadly seriously. Pushing extremists off Wikipedia might not seem equal to the challenge of pushing Hezbollah north of the Litani River. Capturing TikTok might seem less meaningful than holding on to Mount Hermon. Libelous tweets certainly might seem less deadly than missiles from Yemen. But this is urgent because the next war will be decided based on how Israel and its allies perform online as much as offline.
So just a reminder there, sorry that video has low volume, it just is what it is. But just a reminder there that this pressure came from the Anti-Defamation League. That's how this all began. Again, they heavily came after TikTok after October 7th when creators were telling the truth about the creation of Israel and, of course, what has been happening to the Palestinian people. So that pressure and that push came from them. Notice he also mentioned Twitter. Remember, Elon Musk started to change his censorship on Twitter after he went to Israel. So we're talking about an organization, and of course, don't forget AIPAC, an organization and a lobby interest group that have tremendous influence to the point where they can push our politicians to ban an app that they feel is not talking about Israel in the way that they want it to be discussed. So that in itself is problematic, but I got to remind you how we got here. Now we are fast forwarding to the SCOTUS hearing, and I do want you to hear from TikTok's lawyer. Part of this discussion here that takes place between the lawyer and this is Amy Coney Barrett. Listen to this.
Speech here. So it strikes me that this is a little different than your Bezos example, because there it's clearly content discrimination because we're talking about the ability to post particular articles versus other articles. Am I right that the algorithm is the speech here?
Yes, Your Honor. I would say it's, the algorithm is a lot of things.
This is Noel Francisco. He's the attorney for TikTok and parent company ByteDance.
The algorithm has built within it, it's basically how we predict what our customers want to see.
The editorial discretion.
Yeah, the editorial discretion. It also has built within it the moderation elements. All of this kind of comes together when the source code is translated into executable code in the United States. In the United States, that executable code is then subject to vetting, review, moderation through content moderation algorithms, and so it ultimately lands on the TikTok platform.
But what we're talking about as a net choice is the editorial discretion that underlies the algorithm. And I just want to be clear, a lot of your examples talk about, including the Bezos one, the right of an American citizen to repeat what a foreign entity says or say, I'm hitching my wagon to China, I want to say everything China does. Here, the concern is about the covert content manipulation piece of the algorithm. That is something that ByteDance wants to speak.
So one of the things I noticed with this hearing, and it's very long and we are not going to go through the whole thing. I would not bore you with that mess. These justices have no idea how TikTok actually works. It reminds me of that hearing that Mark Zuckerberg had about Facebook in Congress, where a lot of these congressmen had no idea what Facebook really was and how it works. So what she is basically saying is that the algorithm is allowing for certain content to be exposed. Listen, I know a number of people that have been banned from TikTok, a number of people that have been censored on TikTok. They've had videos removed. You guys may have already known this, but Midwestern Mocks, they've had a number of their videos removed on TikTok, and that's been happening before October 7th. So this idea that TikTok was not trying to monitor its content is completely false. However, the difference between TikTok and some of these other platforms is that their algorithm allows the everyday average Joe to get on there and go viral. Whereas a lot of us who try to do this on platforms like Twitter or YouTube fail to do so because the algorithm is fixed in such a way. So what she basically is trying to say is that the anti-Israel content, that's what this is really about, got too much attention. That's really what she's trying to say. Listen to a little bit more here.
Well, Your Honor, I think that ultimately it's TikTok's choice whether to put it on the platform.
And you don't want that. Is your client disclaiming
we absolutely resist any kind of content manipulation by China at all. But what I do want to focus in on is what their asserted interests here. They do talk about covertness, but it can't possibly be that all they're concerned about is mere covertness. If all you were concerned about was the covertness untethered from the underlying content, that's something that could be easily addressed through a risk disclosure.
But that goes to scrutiny, the level
Yes,
of the application. Let's say that I agree with you, the First Amendment is implicated, and I'm trying to figure out what level of scrutiny applies, and I'm trying to figure out what content, if any, discrimination is going on here. There's a disproportionate burden. Let's say that I agree with you about that. No one is preventing you. You're seeking access to a particular source code, engineering, the recommendation feature. It's the technology that you want. You're not trying to repeat, as in the Bezos example, if we take the speech that the government's concerned about to be the covert content manipulation rationale, you're not seeking to utter that speech.
What?
So in my opinion, and some people disagree, in my opinion, this is a free speech issue, because how dare you tell TikTok, oh, we're sorry, but we don't like the fact that certain people are going viral on your platform with certain information. information about Israel that they don't deem to be acceptable. It's their business. They can choose what type of algorithm they want to have. Why is the government trying to tell an app how they should have their algorithm operate? I mean, if this is the case, I mean, come on, man. You guys heard Mark Zuckerberg complain that they were trying to, tell him what to take down, what can be there, what to suppress, the type of content, Hunter Biden, of course, the pandemic, etc. And he went along with it. We know Elon Musk is doing the same. And TikTok is that one platform that they haven't been able to have that type of control over. But again, I ask this question. This is a business. This is not a government app. I could understand if the app was created by the government, sponsored by the government, etc., but it is not. So why is it okay for the government to tell a private company what type of algorithm they can have? And for those of you who do support free market, and I know some of you watching me do, for those of you who do support free market, how is this okay? How is this okay?
That's correct, Your Honor. What we are seeking to do is use an algorithm that displays the combination of content that we prefer our users to see on the platform.
And the government doesn't care about that. I mean, the government is fine with you doing that. You can invent it yourself. It doesn't even care what content that displays, cat videos or whatever.
Yeah, but I think that the way that the analysis has to unfold is first you ask, is this law burdening our speech? I think we agree that the law is burdening our speech. Then you have to look at whether the law itself is somehow content-based, not just what their motivations are, but whether the law is content-based. And here, the trigger for this law, the one thing that gets it going is if you operate a social media platform that has user-generated content, unless that content takes the form of a product, travel, or business review. Then within that universe of content, it says there's one speaker we're particularly concerned about, and we're gonna hammer home on that one speaker. And then just to make the rubble bounce, they come in and tell us that one of the reasons they're targeting that speaker is because they're worried about the future content on that platform, that it could in the future somehow be critical of the United States or undermine democracy, to pull examples from the government's brief. So I think there's no way to get around the fact that this is a content-based speech restriction, and you do have to go directly to what their interests are. Now, their principal interest is...
I think I'm a little bit surprised by one of the answers that you gave to Justice Barrett. I had understood that TikTok's essential complaint here is that they wouldn't be able to use the algorithm that ByteDance has invented, and that they want to use the algorithm that ByteDance has invented.
100%. And if I was unclear on that, Your Honor, I apologize. That is
okay, because I think what Justice Barrett was saying to you is like, what's the problem here? Because ByteDance is a foreign company. Or maybe this isn't what Justice Barrett says, it's just what I say.
Pause for a second. Now, all of a sudden, it's a problem because it's a foreign company. The United States operates and participates in the free market with foreign companies all the time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have half the products that we have in this country. I just want to remind you of that. And if this app was from Israel, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't even be having this conversation now, would we? It's not even about criticism of the American government, Amy Cohen Barrett. It's about criticism of Israel. Let's be clear. Most of this criticism came after October 7th through the push of the ADL. Now, you can formulate whatever ideas you want in your head, but if you have paid attention to everything that's happened after October 7th, I think we all know who is really running this government. I think we all know who is really calling the shots. And I told you the donors, the billionaires, etc. But there's also a lobby interest group called AIPAC who has tremendous influence over our politicians and our government decisions. So if it's really about a foreign company and country, Ms. Kagan, Why is it that when it's Israel, it's okay? Any other country, it's a problem. If it's China, it's a problem. If it's Russia, it's a problem. If it's Israel, it's okay. JFK was correct. JFK was correct when he wanted the former organization, before it was AIPAC, to register as a foreign agent. That was a missed opportunity, but he was killed. If that would have happened, we probably wouldn't even be here today. I cannot believe we are at this point where people are seriously trying to remove an app where most of the videos, from what I've seen, are people doing silly dances. But because there was criticism of Israel, we got to remove this platform. And of course, they're not going to tell you that's the reason. They put the blame on China. You can watch the rest of that hearing if you want to. Like I said, it's very long and very much boring. Again, these justices have no idea how this operates. But let me tell you something, folks. The TikTok creators are fighting back. Power to the creators. Because they decided, since you want to tell us that this is all about China, when we know it's really about Israel, we are going to hop over to another app that really is all about China. And that is exactly what has happened. I don't know if you're familiar with this app, but TikTok users flock to Chinese app RedNote. And by the way, I joined officially today. I tried to join yesterday and I couldn't even create a profile because so many people were trying to join that app at the same time. There's literally a thing on there that's called TikTok refugees on RedNote. It's just like TikTok. It's the same format, right? The vertical videos that you can upload. It's the same format as TikTok. And so many people have joined there now that it has made news. TikTok users flock to Chinese app RedNote as US blooms. Listen to this. TikTok users in the US are migrating to a Chinese app called RedNote with the threat of a ban just days away. The move by users who call themselves TikTok refugees has made RedNote the most downloaded app on Apple's US App Store on Monday. So let me tell you something. As I told you guys before, I worked with Gen Z kids and no, not millennials, just all Gen Z. I worked with Gen Z kids. I told you before, they are incredibly resourceful. So when you remove something from them, they already know what they can go to next. And they made the move before the app was banned. So they were being, they saw this as an urgent situation. And it makes sense. If you're a full-time creator on TikTok, it totally makes sense that you're where else do I need to go that has a similar format where I can continue doing what I'm doing? Because some people don't look at it this way, but I do. This is still a labor issue. There are a number of people that make money on TikTok full time. You know some of those people, and they do great videos. They do great work. So they said, F that. So all this push from the US government saying that TikTok is China and all this stuff. Now the people on TikTok say, oh, okay. So since you want to go that route, how about we actually do go over to an app that is in China? The move by users who call themselves TikTok refugees, went to that part, sorry. RedNote is a TikTok competitor popular with young people in China, Taiwan, and other Mandarin-speaking populations. By the way, you can even translate it to English too. I did that already. Hey. It has about 300 million monthly users and looks like a combination of TikTok and Instagram. It allows users, mostly young urban women, to exchange lifestyle tips from dating to fashion, etc. And I'll tell you guys, when you get a chance, check it out. I checked it out. I honestly, some people are saying they think this is better than TikTok. Like, it was pretty smooth. Like, the next couple of days might be kind of bumpy because everybody's trying to go over there at once. But once I got it up and going, it was pretty smooth. Pretty smooth sailing. So I was like, hey, let's do the damn thing. Supreme Court justices are due to rule on the law set January 19th. That's the deadline for TikTok to either sell its U.S. operations or face a ban in the country. TikTok has repeatedly said that it will not sell its U.S. business, and its lawyers have warned that a ban will violate free speech protections for the platform's over 170 million users in the U.S. So RedNote says, welcome, welcome. There are 63,000 posts on the topic, TikTok refugee, where new users are taught how to navigate the app and how to use basic Chinese phrases. Oh, and by the way, you can educate yourself as well, okay? Get a little bit of education on. People are like, I'm willing to learn Mandarin, damn it. Some of it's kind of easy to figure out because, again, like I said, it's the model of it, like the layout is very much similar to TikTok. So if you can use TikTok, you can figure it out. And I'm like, you know what? Let's do the damn thing. They are pushing people into China's arms instead of pulling them away. And this is what I've said before. You take something from somebody, you tell them they can't have it. They're just going to find another way to have what they want. It's kind of like when you were in high school and you may have had that one friend, or maybe it was your parents. You may have had that one friend whose parents told them, you better not date that guy. We don't want you dating that boy. Some of you are being quiet, but you're probably smiling. You know what I'm talking about. The more they tell you what you can't do, it only makes you want to do it more. So they just pushed them over there. They really did. Right into the arms. So now it doesn't mean it's censorship free though. It says, like TikTok, there have also been reports of censorship on RedNote when it comes to criticism of the Chinese government. So it doesn't mean there's no censorship, but I think this is basically a way for TikTok creators to hit back at SCOTUS, hit back at the Biden administration and say, screw you guys, you know? It was really sneaky and crummy what Biden did because Trump had already announced to put a pause on it. So he just pushes it through. You know, Biden, you got to be a catty son of a bitch. Like, I don't think I've ever seen someone like this before. Just so catty, like, oh, yikes. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And then there's this rumor that we do want to kind of put this to rest because this has not been confirmed. So don't get crazy excited about this. But TikTok responds to rumors. China wants to ask Musk to buy the platform, and they are saying this is pure fiction. Now, the last thing we need is for Elon Musk to purchase another platform. No. We all know he's not free speech. Come on now. We all know he'll probably crack down on the Israel, criticism as well. What is happening here? Do we really want Elon Musk to own what's next? Twitter, TikTok? What's he coming for next? YouTube? No. But what it says here is that after rumors circulated Monday that China was looking to have the owner of X purchase TikTok, a representative for the latter said it was pure fiction. So I did want to go ahead and put that rumor to rest. I don't know where it started, but they are saying that they are not looking for Elon Musk to buy TikTok. So Elon Musk still needs to figure out Twitter, number one. And I don't think we need a billionaire owning all these social media apps. It's very dangerous, So it looks like they are going to remove TikTok, at least here in the United States, based on what I heard from the SCOTUS hearings. It seems like it's heading in that direction. But you know what? Gen Z once again showed you that things can change. More people now are joining RedNote than ever. Interesting, huh? Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super chat, Fire Chief Hughes. Good coverage on LA wildfires, Sabby. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, those videos really took off. Like, I was surprised. Like, one of them got over 100,000 views. Oh, is the one about the billionaire water? I was like, holy shit. Thank you for the super sticker. Let's discuss some things. Thank you. Roger says, Sabby, since when do you hate to tell us so? You know you love doing that. My mom used to say that too. Dwayne says, I suppose no one taught those Supreme Court justices about the First Amendment. Let's Play Who's Controlled Opposition says, interview Matt Kim. I can work on that. Javian says, my issue is that as an American software engineer, I can't put my apps in China app stores. It's not fair. I know. And it's really insane when you think about it that we have to have like different app stores because of the country. Like, I just think that's ridiculous. And I think it's just a waste of resources, in my opinion. Cisco says it's not okay in free market capitalism. In a true free market, all platforms are available to consumers without regulation. Get a point there, Cisco. Thank you, Cheetah. I've joined RedNote, aka as an American TikTok refugee fam, just despite the ruling class. Anyway, I followed you, Sabby. Awesome. If your name is still, I'll look for you on there. I know some people, the name that they have on YouTube isn't the same name in some of these other social media platforms. Dwayne says TikTok is not spreading propaganda. They just have a platform that the U.S. government can't control. There you go. And thank you, Juanita. Hey, Sabby, I downloaded the app today from App Store. What? Let's go. Let's get the comments on Rockfin. Thank you for the tip, Dave. Thank you, Sabby, for covering these topics tonight. And thanks, Roger. Sab, if this were a government app, it would not against our interest, but work more in favor because the government is directly violating our First Amendment rights by censoring a service that is public. This is why they refuse to nationalize it. Yeah. And thank you for the Rumble rant, Goo. There is also a Palestinian TikTok called Reds. Oh, snap. I'm telling you guys, we're getting all over there. It's a lot of love tonight. A lot of love. I wore the hearts for a reason. Tonight. Okay. If you haven't done so, go ahead and smash the like button. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Just like a Care Bear. And we are moving on to probably the biggest story tonight. So things can change. And apparently, when it comes to the ceasefire in Gaza, things have changed. Now, everybody's melting down over the story that I'm about to explain to you. And I'm woman enough to admit, I told you guys this before. I will give credit where credit is due, regardless if I voted for that person, if I like that person or not. And tonight's going to be one of those nights where I'm going to have to give credit where credit is due. Doesn't mean I approve of everything, but we're going to get into the details. But I will give credit where it's due. First, we got to go through the timeline. Let's start back. It was recently at Trump's press conference, he made this comment that made people think otherwise. Listen to this.
Tuesday.
If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
A bill.
Let's go back just a little bit here because I do want to increase the volume on this one. And it could just be, sometimes these videos can be a little...
Gaza. President-elect Donald Trump giving the terror organization this warning on Tuesday.
If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
A billboard celebrating Trump's comments put up in Tel Aviv.
Okay, so they put up a billboard celebrating what he said there. Just a flashback. We ain't got to go through the whole thing, but reminder that Donald Trump said that, right? So a lot of people said that Trump would be worse with the Gaza situation, and that's why you should vote for Kamala Harris because of that reason. When I had this conversation with Mark Lamont Hill on his show, I said, how much worse can you get? Because genocide is genocide. Gaza is already pretty much flattened. It pretty much does look like a parking lot. They've been starving people. They've been bombing people. I'm like, how much worse can you make it in Gaza compared to what has already happened, right? So that was my take on it. And then something happened. Trump made that comment, and then all of a sudden he posted this video of Jeffrey Sachs on Truth Social. And people kind of wondered, is he trying to send some type of a message? And if so, what message was he trying to send? So here's the video that he shared on Truth Social of Professor Jeffrey Sachs.
For the war in Syria, and you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that that Obama tasked the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government, starting 4 years before Russia intervened? What kind of nonsense is that? And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad? 3 times in 10 years. This is not democracy. This is a game. And it's a game of narrative. Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It wasn't, oh, we were so wrong, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They actually did focus groups in the fall of 2002 to find out what would sell that war to the American people. Abe Schultzky, if you want to know the name of the PR genius. They did focus groups on the war. They wanted the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. It was a phony war. Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually. You know that? It's weird. And the way it is that Netanyahu had from 1995 onward the theory that the only way we're going to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah is by toppling the governments that support them. That's Iraq, Syria, and Iran.
So we'll pause it there for just a second, but many people were asking, okay, this is Jeffrey Sachs criticizing Netanyahu, blaming him for the Iraq war, saying that it was his idea. And people were like, why would Donald Trump post that, knowing he's about to resume his position in the White House, knowing that he's working with Netanyahu behind the scenes? He told him, of course, we'll give Israel what it needs, right? Why would he post that? What message was he trying to send? Let's continue.
And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch, sorry to tell you, because he's gotten us into endless wars, and because of the power of all of this in the U.S. politics, he's gotten his way. But that war was totally phony. So what is this democracy versus dictatorship? Come on, these are not even sensible terms.
That was the video that gave many people pause. It's not like Jeffrey Sachs said just one thing there about Netanyahu. He said multiple things about Netanyahu, even, of course, accusing him for the U.S. involvement in the Iraq war. So what was the message that maybe he was trying to send? Then there was this. And this is the video, I think, that gave a lot of people pause. Thank you for sharing this, Noga. Stunned like the true believer he is, Netanyahu proxy Errol Siegel laments, "We're the first to pay a price for Trump's election. The deal is being forced upon us. We thought we'd take control of northern Gaza, that they'd let us impede humanitarian aid. Wasn't that the message that was sent? Didn't Donald Trump say that if he's president, he'll let them stop all of the aid going into Gaza, right? Does this sound familiar? Remember when Donald Trump was running in 2016? Remember the things that he said about North Korea? And he was like, oh yeah, we're going to go after them. And them, yeah. And then the moment that he was in office, he found some way to work with Kim Jong-un. He found a way to build some type of relationship with North Korea. Could it be possible that the same thing is happening now? I want to show you this video yourself so you can see it. I believe we'll put the captions on because he is speaking in Hebrew, if I remember correctly. So listen to this.
אמרתי כאן שהראשונים לשלם את מחיר הבחירה שלו יהיו האוקראינים, טעיתי. יכול להיות שמי שמשלמים ראשונים את מחיר הבחירה של טראמפ זה אנחנו, כי הוא בעצם העסקה הזאת, אני לא רוצה להגיד, ננסים להיכנס לתוכה, לא להשתמש במילים, וגם אני לא יודע את כל הפרטים, ולכן אני אהיה יותר זהיר וכו', אבל אני לא חושב שזה מה שאנחנו תכננו וזה מה שציפינו. חשבנו את דברים אחרים, חשבנו שנשתלט.
So he said, I don't think we planned or expected that we should have done other things. What matters is if we take control over northern Israel.
צפון הרצועה יאפשרו לנו למנוע הכנסת סיוע הומניטרי לאזורים האלה, וככה נפעיל לחץ על...
Okay, he said they can allow us to, of course, reduce the humanitarian aid to these areas and thus reduce pressure on Hamas.
מה שקורה, וצריך להגיד את האמת לצופים, אם מיליון עזתים חוזרים בצפון הרצועה, צה"ל לא יחזור להילחם בצפון הרצועה. אתה לא תעשה את כל האירוע הזה מחדש, להוציא מיליון איש משם, זה לא יקרה, צריך להגיד את האמת. יכול להיות שישארו בחלקים, בפרימטר, בפילדלפי וכו', אבל מיליון איש שחוזרים בצפון הרצועה, מסיים את הסיפור. ועוד דבר, בזה המשפחות החטופים כנראה צודקות. הנשק האסטרטגי של החמאס זה החטופים. הם תמיד ישירו בידיהם קלפי מיקוח.
So this is the video that is giving people a lot of pause. So again, we're the first to pay a price for Trump's election. The deal is being forced upon us. We thought that we would take control of northern Gaza, that they'd let us impede humanitarian aid. So this is Israel complaining because now they're saying they are forcing a deal upon us. That is Donald Trump. I see Biden trying to take credit for this. But you can even see it here from Ali. Ali says, not there yet, but we're closer than ever to a ceasefire due to two factors. One, steadfast resistance in Gaza, inflicting attrition, losses on enemy. Two, Donald Trump putting direct pressure on Israel that Joe Biden refused to do. There's an example here. Trump's Mideast envoy forced Netanyahu to accept a Gaza plan he repeatedly rejected. So let me say this again. Trump's Mideast envoy forced Netanyahu to accept a Gaza plan he repeatedly rejected. Israeli sources say that the involvement of the incoming U.S. administration led by Trump aggressive Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff revived hostage talks with Hamas, while Netanyahu's propaganda machine claims that Trump has left him no choice. What happens inside his coalition will determine whether the prime minister approves the deal. Everybody see what's happening here? And of course, shout out to Ali for sharing this information. In fact, Witkoff has forced Israel to accept a plan that Netanyahu had repeatedly rejected over the past year. And I want to get into this article here from Jeremy, because I want to get to that. Because what this shows you, ladies and gentlemen, as much as I don't like Trump, did not vote for Trump. If you're new, I didn't vote for Kamala either. So not a Democrat, was a Democrat, didn't vote for Kamala either. I voted for Jill Stein. As much as I don't, I have to admit something very important. If there's one thing that Donald Trump has showed us is what the president can do. The power of the president. Now, he wasn't the first. Don't forget that Ronald Reagan did this very same thing. Ronald Reagan picked up the phone, called Israel and said, that's it. That's enough. Not a fan of Ronald Reagan either, but still, that's enough. It's going too far. Israel is losing support. Too many people are being killed. I believe this was with the attack in Lebanon. Said, that's enough. Stop it. And just like that, it was done. As much as I've tried to tell people this over the past year, what Biden and Kamala could actually do, there were a number of people that were continuing to be stands for the Democratic Party that tried to bullshit me with these excuses. Give them time. Give them a chance. You don't know what's going to happen. They're trying their best. AOC told you on the stage of the Democratic National Convention that they were working tirelessly for a ceasefire, only to be pushed back against by one of her own comrades, Ilhan Omar, which said that is not true. And I told you over and over again, they were never working tirelessly for a ceasefire. That requires one phone call. I do need to remind you that Joe Biden just also gave Netanyahu more money, just gave him more billions at the end of 2024. That's not pushing towards a ceasefire. Now, Jeremy took a deep dive into this. I want to bring this up here. This is Jeremy Scahill from Drop Site News. I think you guys are familiar with him if you've been following Gaza. He's been talking about this for quite some bit. He said the Trump factor, Gaza ceasefire deal appears close. Donald Trump's decisive role in pushing forward the potential ceasefire is evidence that Joe Biden refused to use his full powers as president. Jeremy is on it. And I don't know where Jeremy stands politically, but he's with this particular issue, he has been on it. And it's funny, they put this picture here of Donald Trump with his hand over his head. Like, it reminds me of, do you guys remember the sitcom Martin? Remember Martin Lawrence? And Martin had this character that he played named Jerome. So Martin played different characters on the show, Shanae, Jerome. And Jerome used to do this thing where he would put his hand over his head and he would go, I'm an original player from the Himalayas. That's what this picture reminded me of. Now, I can't say it the way that Jerome can, I'm sorry. But that's what this picture reminded me of. This picture that they put here. Yes, Jerome's in the house. Watch your mouth. So, okay, so some of you remember. Okay, but listen to what Jeremy says here. The prospect for an agreement to halt Israel's war against the Palestinians of Gaza is at its most promising point in over a year. Sources close to Hamas negotiating team tell Dropsite News that on Monday, Hamas agreed to the framework text, including an exchange of captives and hostages, and had not requested any significant changes or amendments. But the devil, as always, is in the details. Many of the obstacles have been ironed out. This is coming from Ansari, the spokesperson for Qatar's foreign ministry. There are many pending issues, part of which is related to the implementation. We believe we have minimized many of the disagreements between both parties, and current discussions are focused on final details. We are the closest than at any time in the past to a deal. This war should have been over a long time ago, and it could have been over a long time ago. It wasn't, because Joe Biden, and Biden said Kamala Harris was a part of all of these decisions. Let's remember, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris never put this type of pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. They were tiptoeing around this man. Joe Biden told you so himself. He said that he was a Zionist. Don't forget, I showed you what the Biden campaign website said about Israel and Gaza before his campaign staffers told him he had to remove it because it was insensitive to Palestinian Americans. Has always been a staunch Zionist. Never gave a damn about these people. They had no response to the protest because they weren't expecting that to happen. Their own staff admitted that. They weren't expecting the world to turn on Israel. Right? Shows you how out of touch they are. Palestinian negotiators told Dropsite they remain cautiously optimistic a deal will be signed, though they point to a previous rounds of ceasefire negotiations that saw Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insert new demands in the 11th hour, effectively sabotaging the agreements. I hope Netanyahu won't play the same game of the last 15 months. Can you believe it's been this long? It's crazy. The most minute detail can undermine the negotiation. It is not about how big or small an issue it is. What is different this time, however, is that President-elect Donald Trump has made very clear his demand that a deal be reached before his inauguration on January 20th. The terms of the deal being negotiated are largely consistent with what was on the table last May when outgoing President Joe Biden first announced it, which goes to show you once again, this could have been done. Now, don't get it twisted. This doesn't mean that I believe that Donald Trump cares about the Palestinian people. I think that Donald Trump cares about how he looks and how this makes him look. And honestly, I don't think he wants to deal with this mess going into his presidential term. There's a lot of other things going on, but I don't think he wants to deal with this. So don't get it twisted, because I can see someone trying to clip this and say, oh, Sabby is standing for Trump and da-da-da. No, it's not that way at all. I'll give credit where credit is due, but I don't think he's doing this because he cares about the Palestinian people. I think he's doing it because he wants to look out for himself, right? He doesn't want to have to deal with this. He goes on to say, Biden allowed Netanyahu to steamroll him for months, rewarding Israel with billions of dollars in arms, transfers, and political support after rejecting that ceasefire deal. Since that time, tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed and maimed, and an unknown number of Israeli captives killed either by their captors or Israeli strikes. All the while, the administration and its backers repeatedly assured voters in the U.S. that Biden and Kamala were working tirelessly to achieve a ceasefire deal. That's another thing. I'm glad that he brought that up. As many times as he said, oh, I had a conversation with Netanyahu, we're going to have a come to Jesus moment. Every time that Netanyahu went against the negotiation, the U.S. response was to continue to give him weapons. So I'm not quite sure what Donald Trump said to Benjamin Netanyahu to make him change his mind. I would have liked to have been a fly on that wall. You know what I'm saying? Because it could have been something like, listen, motherfucker. We always see how Trump is on TV. I wonder if behind the scenes, Trump grabbed the phone and said, listen up, motherfucker. Didn't I tell you to fix this? Didn't I tell you to end this mess? I'm not dealing with this when I come into the White House. You listen to what I'm saying? Listen to me. And then someone walks into the room and he goes back to his Trump voice and goes, and we are going to do and get the deal done. That's what we're going to do. Get the deal. We're going to be great. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Now don't mess with me again. Next time I tell you I want something done, I want it done, damn it. We don't know. I don't know. Everybody got that other side of them, you know. Even you guys probably know some of the nicest people that you know, every now and then you might have caught that side of them. So I don't know what he said to him on the phone, but apparently it was enough to make members of his party come forward on Israeli television venting that we're being pushed into this. We're being forced into it, which means that Biden never forced them into it, which is what I have been saying all along. Now, I got criticized. I was shouted down. I was called a Republican. I was called all these different names because I said, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein, who is right on this issue. And she's not a part of either of these two parties. And people said that I was trying to help Trump win and all this stuff because I was voting for Jill Stein. All the people who came to me with all this trash, what do you have to say now? Because whether you agree with Trump or not, what he is showing you is that a president can get certain things done if they are willing to do it. And Joe Biden was not willing to do it. So the fact that Trump emerged as a decisive player in pushing a potential ceasefire forward is evidence that Biden never use the full powers available to a sitting U.S. president to seal the deal in the summer. While Trump has publicly repeated his threat that he will unleash hell on Hamas if the Israeli hostages are not freed, his pressure has not been solely focused on Hamas. Trump and his aides have made clear to Netanyahu that the president-elect expects Israel to comply with his demands too. Everybody hear this? I understand there's been a handshake and they are getting it finished, and maybe by the end of the week, Trump told Newsmax Monday night. So how is it again that he could do this, but Biden couldn't? It's not that Biden couldn't. He just didn't want to. I really do believe that Biden and Kamala Harris, they were planning to drag this out as long as possible. And honestly, had it not been for the protests, they probably would have let him go in even stronger than he did in the beginning. But because of the outcry from the public, then it was like, okay, now we got to try to get them to dial it back or make it look like we're trying to do something to put it into this. I mean, this is just, it's unbelievable. For sure, part of Trump's motivation involves humiliating Biden and claiming victory for freeing the hostages. That's it. That's what it is. I think what Trump is trying to do is to clean house and to start a new slate. And I'm sure he has a lot of ideas about how he's going to reward Israel and Netanyahu once this is done. That's another thing. There is going to be a reward for Israel. So don't think that Israel's not getting anything out of this deal. You can never trust what Netanyahu says or does, but I think the new factor here is really that the new Trump administration does not want the headache. And it tells you here that Steve Witkoff participated directly in the negotiations. And it goes on to say, let me just tell you what the deal is. According to the leaked draft, this is a draft, 3 phases agreement framework. This is how this will work. Hamas will release 33 Israeli held in Gaza. So 33 hostages held in Gaza, some alive and some deceased. And this is what I was saying before. How do we know all those hostages are still alive? Because if they were starving the Palestinians, they were starving them too. This is what I was trying to say last year. Those would be women, children under the age of 19, elderly people, injured or sick civilians. In turn, Israel will release, listen to this, 30 Palestinian children or minors or women. For the 5 female Israeli soldiers being held, 50 Palestinian prisoners will be freed. The exchange would begin with the release of 3 Israelis and then continue in small groups over the course of 7 weeks. Among the Palestinians to be freed would be 47 people who were arrested by Israel following a prisoner exchange in 2011. So they've been in jail all that time. Israel will also release all women and children it has detained since October 7th, 2023. During this period, there would be a temporary cessation of military operations by both sides. So then it gets into other phases. Eric, can you put the link to this in the chat so people can read the full article? I'll try to see if I can get Jeremy to come onto the show. But the reality is, this is something that Biden could have done all along. This is something that Biden could have done all along. Now, let's get to something else, because like I said, there is likely a reward for Netanyahu. Now, this has been leaked from Israeli media. They didn't say which network. They just said Israeli media. Israeli media claims Trump promised to allow Netanyahu to violate the Gaza ceasefire and resume the war after signing a deal. So again, remember where this is coming from. But it's my job to show you everything. Trump's gift bag also includes lifting all sanctions on Israel's spyware, Pegasus, and Israeli settlers and extremists, and allowing major West Bank land theft. So if I were to assume which one of these is more likely to happen, it's probably going to be the West Bank land theft. I think that is still going to happen. However, I'm not quite sure about he agreed to let Netanyahu continue to violate the ceasefire. I'm not quite sure about that. Again, this is coming from Israeli media, so take that into consideration. Still doesn't mean that that would not happen. I don't see why he would want that headache to continue. So just FYI. This could also be Israelis' media way of looking out for themselves and saying that, like, well, we said that he agreed to do this, and that behind the scenes. So just keep that in mind. Israel is known to lie, and Israeli media has been known to lie. So just keep that. But I would not be surprised if the land theft in the West Bank would continue. Because the ceasefire in Gaza is one thing, the West Bank thing is another thing, which either way that would have happened under Kamala or Trump. The West Bank land theft has been happening under Biden-Harris. It would have continued under Harris and Waltz, and it will continue under Trump. And why do I always forget his name? Vance, sorry. It will continue under Trump and Vance. Regardless which side would have won, that is one thing I know that would continue. And it's unfortunate and it sucks. But I will give credit where credit is due for the push for the ceasefire. And some people who called us all kind of names, blocked us and everything, for those of us supporting Jill Stein, some people like Mehdi Hasan, now they're trying to pretend like they didn't realize Biden was lying the whole time, right? So Mehdi Hasan is tweeting, some of us said a year ago that the U.S. president has the power to impose a deal and a ceasefire on Netanyahu and Israel. If President-elect Trump can do it, Biden could have done it for the past year. Shame on him and Blinken and the rest of them. Duh. That's what I said. That's what my comrades at RBN said. That's what Do Dissidents said. That's what pretty much almost everybody in independent media, for the most part, that has come correct on this issue has been saying all this time. But Mehdi Hasan wanted to shut us down. Mehdi Hasan didn't want to have those conversations with us because he knew that we were telling the truth. And his job is to stand and protect and defend the Democratic Party at all costs, even if it means selling out his own damn people. That's his job. Now his job is to come in and to pretend like, oh my God, I can't believe Biden and Harris lied. He knew they were lying the whole damn time. This is a part of the game. So you are going to see a number of people do this. Oh my God, this means Biden could have done this. I had no idea. Max Blumenthal, great point here. Had to check him. Fact check. You spent last October shaming Jill Stein voters for seeking to hold Biden and Blinken and Kamala accountable for the genocide they were carrying out, and promised them that Trump will be even worse than Biden on Gaza. And you guys know Max always has receipts, right? So first screenshot. This is from Mehdi, October of last year. For anyone who doubts Trump will be even worse than Biden is on Gaza, here's Trump saying Netanyahu is doing a good job. Biden is trying to hold him back and probably should be doing the opposite. I'm glad that Bibi decided to do what he had to do. Sorry, but that's kind of how Mehdi sounds sometimes. Here's another one that he shared. To all the trolls in my replies today, answer me this. If it is so vital that Harris is defeated in order to stop the genocide, and that there's no difference on Gaza apparently between Trump and Harris, between the GOP and the Dems, why then do Benjamin Netanyahu and most Israelis want Trump to win, not Harris? Why did Itamar Ben Gvir say they could do much more under Trump presidency? And why should I then ignore the clear desire and public intent of the people literally doing the genocide and listen instead to you? So this is the pompous asshole part of him coming out, right? Here's another one where he retweeted Peter Dow. This is what you call straight up and shameless Trump minimization for some on the left. It's ridiculous. The only reason he hasn't done a genocide in Gaza is because he isn't currently in office. He has made it clear that when he is back in office, Netanyahu will be allowed to kill even more people than he is killing right now. He just said so on Friday. As for Trump never having done a genocide anywhere, well, the erased people of Yemen would like a word. Peter, sheesh. You see what I'm saying? So this dude is opposition. His job is to defend the Democratic Party at all costs, no matter if they're wrong. Like if you couldn't even do the right thing when it came to a genocide, that right there lets you know. So now Mehdi Hassan, is melting down. If we go back here and we'll go to another one. There's another one that he tweeted where he said he's owed an apology. That one really cracked me up. Oh my God. He feels that he's owed an apology. Let's go here. And like I said, there's a reason why you won't see him go after them that way. We'll see if I can find it, guys. I know it's on here unless he removed it, because I know a lot of people were coming after that one. I think Glenn Greenwald retweeted that one as well, because he was just like, what the hell? Because all of us remember. Here it is. He feels he's owed an apology. Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, and every other U.S. official and member of Congress who lied about Israel accepting previous deals on the table and lied about Hamas being the ones who blocked it owe the rest of us an apology. And he says from the horse's mouth. And that's the clip that I showed you guys earlier there. So I would say that people like you, Mehdi, owe us an apology. Those of us who said we would not support Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, those of us that were voting third party, you owe us an apology. If anyone that needs to be apologizing here is you. The rest of us told people what Joe Biden and Kamala were doing. We knew what their so-called strategy was. We knew that they were lying. And Mehdi knew that they were lying too. But again, his job is to defend them at all costs. So now you see people are starting to melt down. And I'm going to tell you this. It hasn't happened yet, but I got to say this. If Donald Trump pulls off this ceasefire, and Biden's trying to take credit, don't forget what the articles have said. It was Trump who pushed them and forced them into it. If he pulls off this ceasefire, I don't see the Democratic Party coming back from this. Because what Trump is doing is he's showing you what the president can do. And what Biden did is he showed you what the president didn't want to do. It's crazy times. Again, I'll give credit where credit's due. I'll give credit for him forcing them into this. I'm still upset about the West Bank, of course, always will be. But I give credit for him, for Trump forcing them into this. And trust me, it's not easy for me to say this, but I do give credit for that. Again, things can change. Crazy times, folks. Crazy times. Okay. Let's go to the comments here. And Eric, we can go to part 2. Thank you for the super chat, P. Smith. Red Heart is anti-LGBTQIA2S +++. What? Red Heart. I don't know. Okay, I don't know what that means. Arcane said, even Trump knows Netanyahu is a scumbag. Yeah. E. Smith said Democrats should be so ashamed of themselves if Trump pulls this off. That's what I'm saying, man. There's no coming back from this. No coming back. Thank you for the super chat, AIR. Wasn't he just joking with Obama? Who? You have to remind me. Thank you, Ravina. Sabby, would you consider interviewing Professor Hamamoto? He's a retired media culture professor. I think you'd find his ideas interesting. Hey, I'm up for interviewing anybody. I'll check him out. Thank you, Egg. Both 60 Minutes plus MSNBC got their orders to throw Biden under the bus with Israel and Gaza to prevent looking like the bad guy. If this was Biden's second term or Kamala's first, this wouldn't even be a thing. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Thank you, Where's the Love? Keep the receipts coming for 2025, Sabby. Thank Marvin. Orange Man grabbed BB by the... Oh, my God. Gamble, thank you. Remember the Simpsons predicted Trump in 2028? Yeah, what's up with all those Simpsons predictions? There's quite a bit. And I think we'll grab Rockfin and we'll go to the next story. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you for the super chat or the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Here's something to consider, Sab. Maybe Trump is seeing how the people react to Jeffrey because he is considering a position for him and his administration. I haven't given up on SCOTUS yet, but as I said, if the SCOTUS upholds the ban on TikTok, they'd be going against Citizens United, where they ruled that corporations are people and therefore afforded same free speech First Amendment protection. Mm-hmm. And thank you, Goo, for the Rumble rant. Listen up, mother. I love this. Listen up, motherfucker. Would have been done by President Samuel L. Jackson. He would also add, I dare you to say what again? Thank you for this one as well. Keep in mind, Israel is violating the ceasefire in Lebanon. They will do the same in Gaza and Palestine. And it's crazy times. Again, I want all of the fighting to end. Like, I want all of it to end. And I just hope it happens. I'll tell you that much. I don't care who does it, damn it. I just want it to happen. MBD said Sabby cursing. I know it doesn't happen often. My dad said he heard me cursing on here one time and he started laughing because he said it sounds funny. Anywho, we're moving on to the next story. Okay. Moving on to the wildfire story. Okay. So, guys, a lot of people are pointing fingers about the LA fires. People are pointing fingers at Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom, etc. Well, Gavin Newsom has finally issued a response. He has done a couple of interviews. And one of the questions that is coming his way is, what about the homes and the land? The people who have had to evacuate, that lost their homes, that lost everything, are they going to be able to get their homes back, to get that land back? What is going to happen with that, right? I want you to hear something that Gavin Newsom said. I found this pretty interesting. This is what he said to Fox Local. Pay attention to this.
We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor of down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties, and the like. So we're already working with our legal teams to move those things forward, and we'll be presenting those in a matter of days, not just weeks. We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor of down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he had.
Why was he dancing there? What was that about? About some land use concerns that he has. It's like when I was on the debate team, like my debate coach used to tell us, don't rock, don't dance, don't lean, don't. It can be a nervous habit, right? People get nervous. They start to dance. Some land use concerns we had. Like, it makes you wonder, like, why is he dancing there? But they're talking about the land. He talked to people in Hawaii. Listen.
Governor of down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties, and the like. So we're already working with our legal teams to move those things forward, and we'll be presenting those in a matter of days, not just.
So people wanting to buy the land. Now, that was the first one. He was questioned about this again by Meet the Press, and I want you to hear what he said to Meet the Press. Again, talking about the land.
With this rebuilding effort needing to take place, is LA going to be ready for all of those global events?
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic, that only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, President of the United States, Donald Trump, to his credit, was helpful in getting the Olympics to the United States of America, to get it down here in LA. We thank him for that.
I don't think right now they should even be thinking about the Olympics. Like, people just lost their homes. I've seen the photos. I know people that live in LA. They've sent me pictures. I've seen some of everything. And I think the last thing that you should think about right now is the Olympics in 2028, even if that means that the Olympics has to be postponed. I don't care. That should not be the concern right now. Let's go back a little bit.
It's not just being naively optimistic. That only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation. President of the United States, Donald Trump, to his credit, was helpful in getting the Olympics to the United States of America, to get it down here in LA. We thank him for that. This is an opportunity for him to shine, for this country to shine, for California and this community to shine. The opportunity with all of that and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team of looking and reimagining LA 2.0.
Let's go back to hear that again. A Marshall Plan?
Country to shine, for California and this community to shine. The opportunity with all of that and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team of looking and reimagining LA 2.0, and we're making sure everyone's included, not just the folks on the coast, people here that we're.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think everyone needs to pay attention to what he's saying here, because first of all, I want to tell you a little tidbit about the Olympics. A couple of years ago, here in Boston, it was propositioned here. They wanted to host the Olympics in Boston. The people were heavily against it. And the reason being is because Boston is very dense. Traffic is already a pain in the ass. The subway doesn't work well like it should, but we do have a subway system. And they said, like, we just don't have the resources to do it. So the city decided to pass. We passed on it. Some people were excited about it, but I think the majority outcry was like, hell no, we can't do it. Right. So it sounds like to me, and I watched the full interview, they're already moving on, thinking about like the next best thing. He's already moving on to how we can rebuild it 2.0. And it seems like this is all around the Olympics. This is all around, like, let's rebuild it. Let's reimagine it. And, you know, a lot of these cities have been talking about smart cities. Again, I'm in the Boston area. They talk about it here, and they removed a lot of parking spaces and parking garages to make things more like try to go into that smart city direction, right? They say less cars, less driving, more biking, more walking, and taking public transportation. And I get it. But at the same time, what does that mean for the people who just lost their homes in Altadena, for example? Pretty much predominantly Black neighborhood, from what I understand, that just lost their homes, along with that net worth. What does that mean? Are these people going to be able to get homes back where they had them? Or is Gavin Newsom and all these business bros going to turn this land into their idea of this smart city, where they are going to build these luxury apartments? I call them boxes nowadays. They make these apartments so tiny these days. These luxury apartments, and everybody is just going to be packed in on top of each other. What happens to the people that lost their homes? And it doesn't seem like there was a lot of focus on that. He's already talking about how they're going to make the city look different. And meanwhile, people that lost everything, they're like, how am I going to be able to come back? So I don't think, and Janine, yes, Janine said they don't want people to have homes. I don't think they do either. I think they want people to have less. They want people to have less. I've seen it over and over again. Guys, I'm trying to forewarn you what is to come. I've lived here in the Boston area for over 13 years, and I'm trying to tell you, over time, they have built less and less homes. It's not that Massachusetts doesn't have land, they do. But what are they building instead? Apartments. These shoebox apartments, people on top of each other. Bam, 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 bam. That's what they want. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen to people here in Los Angeles after these fires.
Included not just the folks on the coast, people here that were ravaged by this disaster.
You just said you're organizing a Marshall Plan for the rebuilding of California. What is that Marshall Plan?
For
Tell
this
us about this
region,
Marshall
we're
Plan.
just starting to lay out. I mean, we're still fighting these fires. So we're already talking to city leaders. We're already talking to civic leaders. We're already talking to business leaders and nonprofits. We're talking to labor leaders. We're starting to organize how we can put together a collection of individuals on philanthropy for recovery, how we can organize the region, how we can make sure that we are seeking federal assistance for the Olympics more broadly, but also federal assistance for the recovery efforts, and how we can galvanize the community with folks that love this community to really develop a mindset so that at scale, we're dealing with the scope of this tragedy and responding to it at scale with efficiency, like the executive order I talked about, time value of delivering projects, addressing building codes, addressing permitting issues, and moving forward to rebuilding and being more resilient.
But what do the residents want? And I'm asking, like, what happened to Lahaina? Right? Remember Lahaina, the fires that were in Lahaina, Hawaii? What happened? What happens to people in Asheville, North Carolina? Because from what I understand, and I've seen the videos on Status Quo, that situation still isn't done with. So what is happening with the land? Meanwhile, look at what the landlords are doing. I told people this was going to be a thing. LA isn't playing around. There's a spreadsheet of landlords price gouging rent during the LA fires. So here we go. See how people are trying to make money? Tracking rental price gouging in LA. And shout out to whoever created the spreadsheet. Guys, this is exactly what we said would happen. What would happen, right? We saw it with Hurricane Katrina. We've seen these things over and over. So what they did with this spreadsheet here, and you can see, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can get to the scroll bar. What they did here is you can see they have a column that says the price before, right here where I have my little cursor, and the price after. So if we look at this apartment here in LA, the price before was $8,995. They've jacked it up to $12,000. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but I just want to show you an example. They are jacking up the rent. The landlords are trying to find a way to make more money. 33% increase. So like I said, obviously the people who were living there that were used to paying a certain amount, they're probably, a lot of them are not going to be able to afford this increase. How can you sit here and try to make a profit off of a time like this when a lot of people lost their homes? But capitalism going to capitalize. That's how we get here. That shouldn't be allowed. Why isn't Gavin Newsom putting a check on that? And then there's another one. There's another fire that started in Ventura County. Let's go ahead and bring that clip in here.
Fire crews now working to contain a new fire that erupted overnight in Southern California. This one is called the Auto Fire. It's now at 0% containment. Wind gusts today could reach hurricane force, up to 70 miles an hour. A rare type of red flag wind warning also in effect in LA and Ventura counties until Wednesday because of those winds, threatening more new fire outbreaks, spreading the Palisades and Eaton fires. I spoke to the LA County Fire Chief on Monday.
So you guys see this? Look at all these fires. Eaton fire, the Hearst fire, and they tell you how much is contained, right? So Hearst fire, 97%, Eaton fire, 33%, Auto fire, 0%, Palisades fire, 14%. So not good.
Are you worried that these new winds may undo the progress that you've been able to make?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If we get a new fire start in a different location, it could be very difficult to contain.
CNN's Michael Yoshida is live for us in Altadena. Michael, good morning. What are you seeing there and what have we learned overnight?
So this is Altadena. This is not one of the big affluent areas. So we all know like Malibu, like a lot of celebrities live in that area. Altadena's, from what I understand, middle class neighborhood.
Hey, good morning, Casey. When you talk about that new fire popping up, just to put in perspective, that's about an hour west of us, but it's the perfect example of that concern that officials have been talking about and why over the last day, throughout the overnight hours, as our team has driven through the Palisades, through Brentwood, here into Altadena, we've seen so many fire crews staging, pre-positioning, trying to be ready for if one of those new sparks, those flare-ups happen, so they can quickly get a handle on it. Now, while we have that ongoing concern and threat of those fires and new fires this morning, and I'm not sure if you can hear, but we have a lot of work happening here in this Altadena neighborhood. Utility crews, gas companies, others hard at work trying to begin some of that repair work. Obviously, as you can see behind me, this, as we've been talking about, one of those communities that's been just devastated by the Eaton fire. You can see some of the lines as well still hanging down. Just an example of how much work is ahead for these communities in and around Los Angeles. But again, right now, that most pressing threat, that biggest concern overnight heading into the rest of the day, is going to be how those winds continue to potentially shift and what impacts they may have on those fires that they've already been working so hard to get those containment lines around, and what any new fires, such as that auto fire, may pop up as well.
And let's not forget, we also showed videos on the show before where a number of residents said that their fire insurance was canceled right before these fires happened, or like 3 months or so before the fires happened. And I mean, like, it is just, Carrie said, I'm convinced this was planned. A lot of people feel this way. I mean, we all know that California has wildfires, so they're not new to this, but this one has been incredibly devastating. They said it's probably one of the worst ones on a larger scale. But to me, some things just don't line up. Like the fact that they were canceling fire insurance for people, and it wasn't the customers who were trying to cancel it. It was the insurance companies that said, we're going to cancel your fire insurance just a couple months ago. And then now these fires are happening. It's really crazy, you guys. And then it goes on to say that I want to show you this as well, because then we have to talk about how do we help them recover? Can they get their land back? Can they be able to build a home there again? And how much money is the U.S. going to give them? And you have got to hear this. Earlier Monday, Biden's press call promised California fire victims a one-time payment of $770. Oh, and by the way, look, once again, don't you see Kamala Harris is right there in the room too? Okay, listen to this.
And I want to be clear. We're not waiting until those fires are over to start helping the victims. We're getting them help right now, as you all know. People impacted by these fires are going to receive one-time payment of $770, one-time payment, so they can quickly purchase things like water, baby formula, and prescriptions. So far, nearly 6,000 survivors have registered to do just that, and $5.1 million has gone out. And I want to be
$770, a one-time payment of $700. I just showed you the landlords have increased the rent already. What the hell is $770 going to do? Let's all think about this, guys. They just had to evacuate. Depending on where they work, some of those businesses may have been damaged as well. So some of them may not have a job. These are just reality. Where are they supposed to go? And I get it. They do need money to get food, etc. I get that. But what the fuck are you going to do with $770 in California? Hell, honey, $770 don't go far for me when I lived in South Carolina either. So what are you going to do with that? Didn't we see the same thing in Lahaina, Hawaii? I think there it was even less. In Lahaina, I think it may have been $750. Didn't they give around that same amount to people in Asheville, North Carolina? Meanwhile, they're giving billions to Ukraine and billions to Israel. But when something happens here with us, with the American people, let's give them a one-time payment of $700. Guys, the stimulus checks were more than that. The stimulus checks were more. Didn't you get a stimulus check that was what, $1,200, $1,600? I forget. It's been a while. But more than that. So it just, I think the people who have money, the celebrities who I don't feel bad for, they will be able to buy another $1 million home. They'll be fine. But the people who had to evacuate that are working class, middle class, those people, how are they going to afford to return there? I saw this happen with Hurricane Katrina, where people were evacuated. They had to leave. And when they tried to come back to New Orleans, they couldn't even afford to live in New Orleans anymore. Is that going to happen also in LA? LA is already expensive as it is. Always putting us last. JB said, Sabby, let's also remember some landlords will put BS in the lease that would put that tenants aren't exempt from rent, even in acts of God. The workers are once again screwed. Right. Like, so if a hurricane happens or whatever, and your apartment building is destroyed, you still have to pay the rent. Depends on what the contract says there. Brown Eyes said, I'm a landlord in LA. That spreadsheet is not completely accurate. They're now showing all the rental comps for those zip codes. Okay. Thank you for that, Brown Eyes. But what are we gonna? Adonia said we got almost 3,600 during Trump for the stimulus checks. I know, and $770. Always putting us last. Let's go to more comments here. Susanna said they do not want them to rebuild. Thank you. Call me Trey. People keep playing like they don't get why Trump makes threats. It's negotiation tactics. You, General, don't have to think he's perfect to comprehend that. Interesting. Thank you, P. Smith. China TikTok is anti-LGBTQIA. Since when? I've never seen that. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that. Thank you. I know myself. If Trump gets a ceasefire, does Barry Soetoro give Trump his peace prize? Let it go to someone that deserves it. Kelly says, I'm wondering if they'll get enough signatures to recall Karen Bass. Yeah. I don't know. It could happen. Don't forget, there was a recall against Gavin Newsom a couple years ago. So here we go. Thank you so much, Dana. Sabby, you and Eric spit so much truth. Y'all give me a headache. Thank you. I live in California. Your news on the Resnicks is unmatched. Thank you. Oh yeah. If you guys haven't seen that video about the billionaire couple the video I made, I'm glad more people are talking about that. I've seen a number of people make videos about that too. So the more that gets out there, the better. Samantha said they have built 2 15-minute cities in Tampa. Interesting. Thank you for the super sticker, Diavolo Martin. Diavolo. Thank you, Courtney. Never let good tragedy go to waste is the move, I guess. SMH. Thank you, Mr. Moral TV. $770, the new $40. Right. Thanks, Anita. WNC. Oh, Western NC people got $750. Okay, so they increased California by $20. Oh boy. And thank you, Kevin. Biden shows what kind of duties a president can shirk. All right, let's get the comment on, I think that's Rumble. Thank you. Hey. Thank you, Goo. Gavin Newsom is American Zelensky. He is La La Land and all over the place. Interesting. And thank you for this one as well. Hi, Sabby. I'm an insurance broker in Canada. In August, we noticed that insurance canceled flood insurance. Then 3 months later, we had large rains and those areas had extensive water damage. You know what? It's such a scam. It's such a scam. What's the point of paying for insurance if they're just going to cancel it? Thank you, RB Ham. Straight out of the WEF, you'll own nothing and be happy. The fourth industrial revolution, build back better. There's a video of Klaus Schwab talking about how LA will be a smart city by 2028. Man, thank you for the tip, Roger. I agree with Daddy, Sabby. You do curse funny. Suburban cursing as opposed to hood cursing. By the way, when you bringing him on? Oh, I have to ask him again about that. Also, add 3 zeros to that $770 and that should do it. Attach it to their social security numbers, not their taxes. Some people work off the books, damn it. Make it universal. This will be millionaires' chance to show how truly altruistic they are by giving to mutual aid. Thank you so much for that. And I think that's $770 before taxes. It's crazy, man. Crazy. All right. And thank you for that one. I think I said that one, Eric. Yeah, I said those already. Thank you. All righty. Smash that like button, guys. We're moving on to the next story here. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Ladies and gentlemen, don't get mad at me. I tried to tell you about Tulsi Gabbard. I said, don't trust that woman. I told you she was a flopperoo. And here we are because she has flopped again. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, things are changing. Things can change. And it has. She has not been sworn in yet for her position in Trump's administration, but she is already causing a stir. I saw libertarians online fighting over this. And this is about surveillance. Tulsi Gabbard is walking back her position on surveillance. What did I tell you? Nico House drops the bombshell.
Tulsi Gabbard backtracks her stance on warrantless surveillance after the Senate threatens to refuse to confirm her as DNI. As most of you all know, Donald Trump shocked the world when he selected Tulsi Gabbard as his future Director of National Intelligence. Despite people's disagreements with her on all sides of the spectrum, the truth is a lot of people were actually excited thinking that this could be a positive change for the intelligence community, finally. But unfortunately, if recent developments are an indication, we just look like we're going to end up getting more of the same. Tulsi came out and announced during a Senate hearing that she will actually support Section 702 of FISA. In an egregious violation of the Fourth Amendment, Section 702 gives the government the ability to engage in warrantless spying on American citizens.
Spying on American citizens. So here we go again with the increase of surveillance. Again, we're supposed to have a right to privacy in this country, but nope, not happening, right? So Tulsi Gabbard was heavily against this. At least she said she was. But because she received pushback about her position on this, and she wants that position, she changed her position on this so that she can get that seat in Trump's administration. I told you that Tulsi Gabbard is a careerist and an opportunist. And here we see it. Now, there are a number of people online that are arguing with each other back and forth about this particular issue. But the reality is, especially for those of you that are part of the Libertarian Party, doesn't this go against what the Libertarian Party stands for? That people do have a right to privacy, that the government shouldn't be able to just spy on you. Didn't we learn anything from Edward Snowden? And yet here we are.
Section 702 was such an egregious violation of American civil rights that Tulsi Gabbard herself authored a bill in 2020 before she left Congress to get rid of 702.
Unfortunately, Congress just passed a bill that will allow the continuation of our intelligence and law enforcement agencies to infringe on the civil liberties of the American people. Now, the Patriot Act and the FISA Act, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, needed to undergo very real reforms if these constitutional abuses are to be prevented in the future. I'm working on legislation, we'll be introducing it, that will do just that.
However, now she's saying that if she is confirmed as a Director of National Intelligence, she will somehow uphold Americans' Fourth Amendment rights while simultaneously maintaining Section 702. In this
Now, let's go back to that a little bit because I do want you to be able to read that if confirmed as DNI, I will uphold America's Fourth Amendment rights while maintaining vital national security tools like Section 702 to ensure the safety and the freedom of the American people. Guys, these things don't go together. Like it just, there's no way. And people, you got to push back on her. You got to. I mean, it's just the FISA Act. It allows U.S. intelligence. Like, this is everything that she is supposed to be against and that she did fight against before in the past. But because she wants that position, she's willing to forego what she really believes. This is what I told you before about these career politicians. And it's not just her. We've seen it with AOC. We've seen it with Bernie Sanders. Notice how they'll be willing to put aside like what they really believe, their core principles, so that they can get a leg up, a promotion, and another opportunity. Maybe they'll be able to write another book. We'll get to her confirmation in a second because there's some delay with that as well.
Maintaining Section 702. And this, of course, came after she was threatened by the Senate, saying that if she does not change her views, they will not confirm her. Now, Tulsi, you are the one who said that you cannot protect Americans' Fourth Amendment rights while simultaneously upholding 702. You did so much research and were so confident in this fact that you literally introduced a bill because of it. And now you're saying that you're somehow going to protect the Fourth Amendment of Americans while maintaining the very policy that was created to infringe upon it? Bruh, come on, for real.
And Nico knows very well. Nico was a surrogate for Tulsi Gabbard when she ran for president in 2020. Like, her views were a lot different back then. So we have seen her go flippity flop, flip flippy. But this one really puts the nail in the coffin, because a lot of people that did support Tulsi Gabbard being a part of this administration was because of her position on surveillance.
What does it say about the United States government that the moment that a politician says that they want to protect Americans, they actually threaten them for doing so? Last I checked, Congress people were elected to protect Americans. But once again, we're seeing a pattern that Congress and the establishment are actually working actively against Americans' best interest. And another note that has to be mentioned is Trump's very loud silence about the fact that his Republican Senate was going to refuse Tulsi the DNI position because she wanted to uphold Americans' constitutional rights. And
they probably said something to him about that too. They probably told him before they told her.
Not a man who is known for being silenced in disagreement. And truth be told, he's not all that silent about protecting the allies that he handpicked himself. So effectively, the US Senate, that is a Republican Senate, is reminding Trump and all of his allies that they are in fact the ones who run the government, and they will decide what's constitutional and what is not. And Trump really has no say in it. Because make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, the DNI position is probably the most important, or one of the most important positions that a president can pick that will influence both international and domestic policy. And if the Senate is basically telling Trump, yeah, you're not going to control what that DNI can and cannot support, then how much control does he really have over that administration?
Unless that's a good question. This tells you about the power of the Senate and the power of the House, right? So we all know, well, maybe not we all know, but I was on a debate team and we went through all this stuff, like Lincoln Douglas debate and all this copy history. So long story short, we know that legislation starts in the House. So even if something passes in the House, that doesn't really mean anything because it still has to pass in the Senate. So that being said, this is why it's important to pay attention to Senate races, right? Not just the presidential race, but who is running for Senate that is on your ballot, who is running for the House that is on your ballot. I told you about those city council seats that are important. People are complaining about the budget in LA. City council makes the budget and the mayor approves it. So these positions are very important. Remember, Congress has the power to the purse, but also Congress has a power of legislation. So the fact that the Senate, and these are GOP members of the Senate, can sit up there and tell Tulsi Gabbard, you are going to change your position on Section 702, or we are not going to confirm your seat as the DNI in Trump's administration. So a lot of times what you tend to see in government are people that have titles, but their titles don't reflect any real power. And then some of the people who may have titles that don't sound like they are important actually has more power and more control than we realize. Trump, for example, as president, can pick all these different people that he wants to be a part of his administration, but that doesn't mean that the Senate is going to confirm them. So you see how the power switches the hands there? The president has more control over foreign policy.
And if Tulsi is going to keep flip-flopping on positions more than Brazilian footwear in the summertime, how can anybody trust that she will actually be a DNI any different than the previous DNIs? MAGA, where y'all at? Y'all gonna keep letting this shit slide, or are we gonna start holding Trump accountable at some point?
This is a good question. And I will say people definitely held Vivek and Elon Musk accountable, and you got to hold Tulsi Gabbard accountable as well. I'm used to it. I'm used to seeing Tulsi do the flipperoo, but not everybody was familiar with her when she was still a Democrat. And when she ran for president in 2020, I mean, this is someone that was in Hillary Clinton's back pocket at one point. You guys got to remember, Tulsi Gabbard was supposed to be the next DNC darling. The Democratic Party decided to split ways with her, or the DNC decided to split ways with her when she endorsed Bernie Sanders instead of Hillary Clinton. She was done after that. But she's always been flipperoo, right? And now there's this issue with her confirmation because there has been a delay. I want to go ahead and get into that. Apparently, there is an issue with filing paperwork.
We're also watching for fireworks in former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing. She's Trump's pick, of course, you'll remember, for Director of National Intelligence. So let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, I want to ask you about something Senator John Barrasso said on Face the Nation. You have information on what he calls a paperwork problem holding up Gabbard's confirmation hearing. What is this all about?
Right. That was the first we had heard of it. He said that there was a paperwork problem with the Office of Government Ethics, which meant that she probably could not have a hearing this week. So that pushes her hearing to next week at the earliest. And what it means in practical terms is that President Trump is unlikely to have a director of national intelligence sworn in on January 20th, the same.
Okay, so everybody hear that. So it's unlikely at this point in time that when Donald Trump has his presidential inauguration, he may not have a director of national intelligence because apparently there seems to be a paperwork issue that is preventing Tulsi Gabbard from getting her confirmation. You guys believe that? Nobody else has a paperwork problem. Pete Hegseth was just confirmed, right? I don't know.
Same day that he is sworn in, which is something that presidents typically like to have because it is such a key position. In Tulsi Gabbard's case in particular, Reed, there are Democrats who have a number of concerns about her. Democrats on the Intelligence Committee, which will be holding her confirmation hearing. They say that she has relatively little intelligence experience. They have concerns about some of her relationships with U.S. adversaries. They want to know why she went to Syria to meet with the deposed dictator Bashar Assad.
Pause. So does everybody see what's happening here? This so-called paperwork issue that they're speaking of, I don't really think is a big thing. I think what is happening here is that the Senate has concerns about Tulsi Gabbard because of some of the comments that she has made about Syria, particularly about Assad. There's that. And then also, don't forget, we just discussed that Tulsi Gabbard agreed to now approve of Section 702, of course, Surveillance Act, for them to just be able to take away our privacy and surveil us as much as they want to. Even though she made that flip, the Senate is saying they still don't know if they want her in that seat. So at the end of the day, if they still decide not to confirm Tulsi Gabbard after she made that pivot, what was it all for? So I don't agree with the whole paperwork issue. I think they just don't want her in that spot. And I think that's what the big delay is about. Now, maybe they decided to hold up things because of that. But I think the Senate does not 100% feel comfortable with Tulsi Gabbard being the director of national intelligence. And I think that's why her confirmation is being delayed.
In 2017. And so they say they are not willing to hold that hearing until they get all of her paperwork, her background checks, her ethics disclosures, and the like. And because this is the Intelligence Committee, Reed, it tends to operate a little differently than the rest of Congress. Congress is obviously famous for its gridlock, lots of acrimony, but because the Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, deals with such sensitive information, government secrets and the like, they tend to collaborate pretty well. And so if all the Democrats are putting their foot down, saying they're not ready to go forward yet, it looks like the Republicans are going to respect that.
Fascinating. Okay, so another question for you. Inauguration Day just days away.
Pause that there. So what you're seeing happen with Tulsi Gabbard is it seems to be bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans are like, we don't know about her. Keep in mind, Tulsi Gabbard is a soldier. So she does serve in the U.S. military. It's not like, but it is because of some of the things that she has said about Assad, because of the comments that she has made about Syria. Now, don't get it twisted. Tulsi Gabbard is an anti-war. She was one of the first people to tweet after October 7th that Israel give them everything they need and let them go in and do what they need to do. Right. So especially when it comes to Israel, she is pro-Israel. So where she had criticism was with the war in Syria. She was against that. And that seems to be problematic here for the U.S. government, regardless what side of the aisle, whether you're Democrat or Republican. So we don't even know if this one is going to go through. And if this one doesn't go through, then what happens to Tulsi Gabbard? Questions to ask, ladies and gentlemen. Where does Tulsi go next if this doesn't go through? And what will it have been worth to have given up on your morals and your principles just for a seat that you don't get? Something to think about. Let's go to some of the comments here. Boot scoot to boot boot. Leroy says, dang, you can hear Nico's disappointment. Yeah. Linnea says Tulsi is a covert operations and communication agent. This is what she does. Terry says flip flop hibbity hop. Thank you for the super chat. None of your business. Who do you suggest would be better than Tulsi? No one that I would mention would ever be selected. Like someone who respects privacy, someone who does not want the U.S. government spying on the American people or is not approving of surveillance. No one that I would mention would even be considered. I think Tulsi was probably the closest you were going to get to someone who had pushed back on. There you go, Tulsi. It totally said Snowden. That's a good one. I love it. I think that Edward Snowden. I think that that was probably the closest you were going to be able to get as someone who was against Section 702, and they won't even let her. So we'll see what happens, ladies and gentlemen. We will see what happens. All right. Ooh, all right. It's time for a pretty cool story. And then we're going to get to, we have 2 stories left. Oh, I'm doing so well on time. Okay, great. All right. 2 stories left, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to switch gears here a little bit, right? Again, so the theme is things can change, and things can change, and they did change with this next story that's coming up as well. Now, I told you guys, and I'll say it again, a lot of these rules The laws and policies that have been applied to Black Americans eventually makes its way to poor and lower income white people too, even though it wasn't meant for you. There was a video that went viral on Twitter. And I'm so glad that it did, because I said, here's another example that I can show the Sabby fam. Everybody in the audience, first of all, raise your hand if you have been a server, waitress, whatever you want to call it. Raise your hand if you've been a server. I waited tables, whether it was college, whatever you did, your jazz. If you've done that, put a 1 in the chat. That's you. You got a 1. You waited tables. A lot of us probably have at some point, right? So then you are familiar with tipped wage. And you're familiar that some states in this country still pay $2.13 an hour to servers because they use the excuse that you receive tips, which isn't always true. Raise your hand if you ever been stiffed. Ouch. It happens. So a lot of you, a lot of ones in the chat coming through. See? Yeah. A lot of them coming through. All right. So that being said, someone put a 0. All right. That being said, you guys know I have argued for quite some time that I wish we were able to do what some European countries do, which is to just pay servers a living wage so they don't have to rely on tips. But that's not where we are. There have been a couple of ballot measures in this country this past year, 2024, that had that on the ballot. It was on the ballot here in Massachusetts to increase the tipped wage. It did not pass here because a lot of people that own the mom and pop restaurants said we can't afford to pay everybody that. This is what happens when you wait this long to get it right. That's not on them. That's just on the system in this country. I want to show you this video of where this all began. Did you ever wonder why the wage was so low to begin with? This is the video that is going viral. And it is really important that you understand why the tip wage is so low in the first damn place. Check this out.
Racism is the reason tipping culture is so out of hand in the US, and it's why people can still be legally paid $2.13 an hour. After the Civil War and the end of slavery, Black workers who were formerly enslaved were usually only able to get service jobs. Racist employers looking to exploit labor found a way to avoid paying Black people any wages at all. They decided that customers could just tip them for their services instead of paying them themselves. From there, the use of tipping to pay workers became more and more common. Before the Civil War, tipping in the US was rare, and it definitely wasn't used to pay someone's entire wage. Then in the early 1900s, a bunch of employers who wanted to keep labor costs down and prevent workers from organizing formed the National Restaurant Association. Since then, they've lobbied Congress to exclude tipped occupations from minimum wage protections and later to establish a lower sub-minimum wage for tipped workers. That's why today, the federal minimum wage for tipped employees is just $2.13 an hour. Tipped workers are 2.3 times more likely to live in poverty than non-tipped workers, and they're more likely to be people of color, women of color, or single parents. They're also disproportionately born outside of the US. Tipping is still used as a way to exploit workers, squeeze more out of customers, and keep people, especially Black and brown people, in poverty.
One more again, and we're going to pause halfway through. Listen.
Racism is the reason tipping culture is so out of hand in the US, and it's why people can still be legally paid $2.13 an hour. After the Civil War and the end of slavery, Black workers who were formerly enslaved were usually only able to get service jobs.
Pause. So after slavery ended, remember, it's not like, okay, all of a sudden Black people are like, yay, all these jobs are for us. No, that's not the way it worked. In fact, there were certain codes. We'll get to that in just a second. Most of these jobs that were available for freed slaves were those types of jobs, the serving jobs, right? I'm saying this because especially white people that are watching me, follow me with this because I'm trying to prove a point. Those jobs were really not meant for white people to have. When people bring up these things and they say, well, how is it that, there's poor white people in the United States? How did that happen? That really wasn't supposed to be a thing, but it was slavery that made that a thing. We'll get to that in just a second. It is always important when you look at like some of these laws and rules that we have in this country, it is always important to go back in history and find out how did we get here. And the reason why a lot of these states in the US still have the tipped wage at $2.13 an hour is because that is what it was for freed slaves back in the day. One of the cheapest labor. They didn't really want to pay them much. And here we are still today. Well, she goes on to bring up the Restaurant Association.
Racist employers looking to exploit labor found a way to avoid paying Black people any wages at all. They decided that customers could just tip them for their services. And
you see that? That's where it came from. So, oh, well, you know what? They're freed, but we don't really want to pay them anything. We never want them to get to the point to where we are. So what we're going to do is we're going to make things more difficult for them economically. We're not going to give them the type of pay that you're getting. So let's just allow people to tip them. Now, as you can imagine, at that point in time, they probably weren't getting as much tips. Thus, it makes you stay in poverty. Thus, it is harder for you to get out of that cycle. And it is going to be more difficult for you to try to generate some type of generational wealth.
Instead of paying them themselves. From there, the use of tipping to pay workers became more and more common. Before the Civil War, tipping in the US was rare, and it definitely wasn't used to pay someone's entire wage. Then in the early 1900s, a bunch of employers who wanted to keep labor costs down and prevent workers from organizing formed the National Restaurant Association.
There we go again with they wanted to prevent workers from organizing. Doesn't that sound familiar? Don't you still hear people talking about that today? TYT, stand up. We know you were union busters. I mean, don't you still hear people talking about this today, how they wanted to prevent workers from organizing? That's still a thing. So the National Restaurants Association were like, no.
Since then, they've lobbied Congress to exclude tipped occupations from minimum wage protections and later to establish a lower sub-minimum wage for tipped workers.
Notice what she said. The National Restaurant Association, they lobbied Congress. So they had a hand in politics.
That's why today, the federal minimum wage for tipped employees is just $2.13 an hour. Tipped workers are 2.3 times more likely to live in poverty than non-tipped workers. And they're more likely to be people of color, women of color, or single parents. They're also
And we went through all of that. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I worked in the restaurant industry, and a lot of us did this like when we were, in college, that type of stuff. And you meet everybody, like especially a lot of the college students, we need a job, we need some money and all that kind of stuff. So typically we would wait tables because those jobs were available in the evening, that type of thing. But in doing that, I met people who were waiting tables full time. And I mean people that had families. I'm talking about women that were in their 40s, 50s, etc. There was a man that waited tables with me at Outback Steakhouse that was in his 60s. Why does anyone in this country in their 60s have to stand on their feet for all those hours throughout the day, carrying heavy trays, waiting tables at that point in life? And people of all different colors that participate in that job force. It's one of the easier jobs that you can get because they're going to train you. If you've never carried a tray before, they train you how to do it. So we need to see how this rule after slavery, how this went on to impact poor and lower income white people too. As I said before, if you go back then, you have to remember who usually had those jobs. Those serving jobs were usually for those who were Black, like people who were freed slaves, who took care of the kids. Think about these things. Who were the nannies? Who were the servers? Who were the waiters? And we'll get to why there was that divide among white workers in just a second. But I take you to this other example, which I continue to bring up on the show, and that was the example of healthcare. What is done to us eventually makes its way to lower income and poor white people. Tom Hartman brought up the issue with why we don't have healthcare for everybody in this country. Listen to this.
In 1887, Germany got the world's first single-payer healthcare system.
Hoffman came over to the United States and got a gig as vice president of the Prudential Insurance Company. And in 1896, he published a book called Race, Traits, and Tendencies of the American Negro. And his argument was that black people were genetically inferior, and therefore, if we simply denied them health care, eventually, within a few generations, all black people would die out, and this would solve the race problem in America. His book was one of the best-selling books in America from 1896 to around 1930. He testified before Congress dozens of times. He testified before all kinds of states. Prudential put him on a nationwide tour. He was the reason why Harry Truman's effort at single-payer health care was shot down. He was the reason why FDR's effort at single-payer health care was shot down. And he was long dead in 1965 when Medicare came along, but his teachings were actually cited as one of the reasons why there's a 20% hole in Medicare, so that poor people, read that in the South as poor black people, won't show up at the hospital and wouldn't thus integrate the doctor's office.
Did everybody hear what Tom Hartman just said? So we all know that when it comes to healthcare, of course, there are the health insurance companies. They lobby, they pay the politics. We get it. We all know that. Or those of us that are really engaged in politics are aware of that. But a lot of people don't know what Tom Hartman just told you. Another reason why we don't have healthcare for everybody in this country, because they didn't want black people to have it. Now, that didn't just end up impacting black people. That also affected poor white people. So this is why I continue to say that race is class and class is race. When people tell you don't focus on race, just focus on class, they are excluding a part of yourself. If you are poor and you are white and people say, oh, don't focus on just, they're excluding everything I just showed you. They are excluding where the tipped wage comes from. They're excluding why you don't have universal health care in this country. These are things you need to know. This is not to make anybody feel guilty. Sometimes people hear these stories and they're like, oh, I feel guilty now. This is not to make anybody feel guilty, okay? This is to tell you the history of where these things come from so that you can understand how we got here. And that is always important. Now, I want to show you this. When we go back to these codes, this is why you were only able to get certain jobs. So people have to remember, after slavery ended, yes, there were black codes. A lot of times people don't want to talk about this. People just go with the story and say, yeah, the slaves were free and that's it. Abraham Lincoln freed everybody and whoop-de-doo. But they don't go into this part. Black codes were restrictive laws designed to limit the freedom of African Americans and ensure their ability as a cheap labor force. After slavery was abolished during the Civil War, everybody see how this all ties back into labor. This is very important. Even though the Union victory had given some 4 million enslaved people their freedom, the question of freed black people's status in the post-war South was still very much unresolved. Under black codes, many states required black people to sign yearly labor contracts. If they refused, they risked being arrested, fined, and forced into unpaid labor. Does everybody understand this? And see, because of the 13th Amendment, remember, slavery is still legal under the 13th Amendment. That's why you have prisoners that work for free. These are all the things that people need to know and understand. So black codes definitely impacted your ability to establish any type of generational wealth in this country. You were limited to the types of jobs that you could have. Now, again, like I said, back then, they didn't realize that this was going to affect white people too. Then there's this part right here. The passage of black codes. Even as former enslaved people fought to assert their independence and gain economic autonomy during the earliest years of Reconstruction, white landowners acted to control the labor force through a system similar to the one that had existed during slavery. Does that sound familiar? The railroad workers that came onto the show, don't you guys see how they still are trying to control the workers? They tell the workers you can't take any days off. The railroad workers, they wouldn't even allow them to go on strike. You see how the government came in and intervened and said, no, no, no. A lot of the railroad workers are white. So do you see how this later on impacted white people too? This is important. And then there's this part here about Mississippi, which I think people need to hear. To that end, in late 1865, Mississippi and South Carolina enacted the first black codes. Mississippi's laws required black people to have written evidence of employment for the coming year each January. If they left before the end of the contract, they would be forced to forfeit earlier wages and were subject to arrest. And then we fast forward to the wealth gap. Because now that I've told you all that, I want you to understand why this gap is still so huge today. 160 years of the black-white wealth gap. See this? From 1860 to 2020. They stopped at 2020 for some reason. I don't know why, but here we are. The wealth gap between white and black Americans is nearly as large today as it was in the 1950s. Highlighted for the friend in the back. Things have not improved. The wealth gap between white and black Americans is nearly as large today as it was in the 1950s. That tells you, as a community, we have not moved forward. As a community, we are not getting ahead. There may be black individuals here and there that, you know, they were able to make it out of poverty and did the damn thing. You can name them. LeBron James, right? You can name Ben Carson and all that kind of stuff. You can name individuals, but as a unit, as a community, we have not moved forward. And that is because of everything that I just told you. So if you see this, you have to understand that when you look at this, are we ready to go to, let's go to that screenshot, Eric. I want to show people that screenshot. We're going to go to the screenshot and then we're going to go to the race to the unequal opportunity race, because I want to show you where we sit right now when it comes to income. And I think that's one of the things that people just may not realize. A lot of times people point to individuals that did well, great. But as a community, we have not. You look at other communities and you'll see this right now. When you look at other communities, we'll look at other groups. Median household income in the United States in 2023. So they don't have 2024 yet. We'll get there. I want you to see something. Who's at the top? Now, when we scoot down here, Asian alone is in the lead. Asian Americans are in the lead. White alone, not Hispanic, are second. So white people aren't even first now. Everybody see that? Hispanic they're third. It says Hispanic of any race, third. Income, 65,000. White alone, 89,000. Asian alone, over 100,000. And then when you get down here, you'll see similarities. American Indian and Alaskan Native Unknown. So indigenous people, 57,000 a year. Black alone, 56,000 a year. We are still last. We are still at the bottom. Nothing has changed for us. Other people have moved around. Everybody see how this is happening? If you look here, you'll see white people are not in the lead anymore. Hello, my white viewers. You ain't in the lead no more. So do you see how now Asian Americans are now in the lead? White Americans, you are second. Hispanic Americans are third. So even Hispanic Americans are ahead of Black Americans with income. My people, we have not moved ahead. We have stayed at the bottom. at the bottom. No shade to the white folks, but I'm just letting you know you ain't elite no more. I think you need to see that. Things have changed. And now people have conversations and stuff about immigration and that type of thing, right? And I'm not anti-immigration, but look at this. So you can see Asian Americans today, I would say their parents or their grandparents, most likely their parents, may have immigrated to the US. Okay, so they are in the lead here. And then Hispanic Americans, like all my friends that are Latino, their parents immigrated to the US. So do you see a pattern? Okay, so we move on here to Altadena. Black Americans in Altadena impacted by the wildfires. And this is the community that I've been wondering about. A historic Black community reduced to ashes. The toll on generational wealth. Systemic insurance challenges. Everything I just told you guys, this was a historic Black community. It is now gone to ashes. So what happens here? How do they rebuild their generational wealth? How do they get their homes back? There have been multiple groups in this country that have had, I want to go ahead and share this as well, that have had to deal with disadvantages, that have had to deal with discrimination. But one thing I got to tell you that people need to understand after everything I just showed you, when people say people of color and all these other groups, you have to understand all those other groups didn't have to go through what I just showed you. All those other groups didn't have Black codes. All those other groups weren't just told, no, you can only move within certain spaces. You can only have these particular jobs. You can only be a server. They didn't have these things. All those other groups, most of them came over here after the civil rights work had already been done. So Black Americans made it easier for you to come here. So that's why it really hurts me when I do see other groups that come here and they talk down on Black Americans and tell us we have no culture and we don't have anything. You have to understand that the reason why you get to come here is because of the civil rights movement and the work that was done. And none of those other groups, when we talk about it, as much as you want to hear, you hear the ADL and APAC and all saying like, oh my God, we're threatened and they're coming after us and et cetera, et cetera. What you have to understand is they do not have the same history that Black Americans do in the United States. And you're going to see that right now. And you watch this video and you tell me if these other groups had all these same barriers that Black Americans did. I don't think they did. This is called the unequal opportunity race. A teacher showed this to her students and she was reprimanded for showing her students the truth. I'm no longer in education. I no longer work in education, so I don't have students anymore. So I'm going to show you the truth. This is what we came from. What you see here, this clock that's ticking, those are the years that are going by. So as you can see, their white counterparts, they already took off in the race. So Black Americans are waiting for their chance to run. And so now it's 16-17. That's generational wealth being passed down. Now, remember what I told you about the employment, right? So they started the race. They get to take off in 1964 to start running. And they're talking about now underemployment. Remember what I told you about the server positions earlier on. So they're trying to catch up. Standardized test. See that? The old boy network. So these are his connections, right? Now, some of you may be wondering again, how did this fit in with poor white people? Because see, poor white people didn't have to deal with like the segregation, right? Because they still had the opportunity. They were still living in like when we had Jim Crow, you still lived on the white side of town. So that type of thing. But some of the things that happened that were done to Black Americans, the reason why you ended up having poor white Americans, I told you earlier in this segment, was because of slavery. Remember, there were those that owned land and those that did not. And one of the ways to distinguish between white Americans was to basically put this scold on white people that did not own property, white people that didn't own land. Now, they didn't put you in the same category as the slaves, but they still saw you as less than them. So you were still able to enjoy some of the same opportunities because you were white, just like they were. But they still tried to find ways to remind you of where your place was as well. This is why I want you to make the connection between race and class. This is why I continue to tell you when someone says just focus on class, there is no just focus on class. The majority of Black Americans are working class. And a lot of the economic issues that you see today that affect labor, all these workers that you see that are fighting for like union rights and just want to unionize, you go back to the National Restaurants Association where they wanted to prevent just that. They didn't want these Black workers to unionize. So now you white workers don't get to unionize. You can't separate the two. They are connected. So think about this. The next time you see a server, especially if you don't tip. If you don't tip, you should be tipping. But think about that. That's where it all comes from. A lot of these things that they tried to do to us eventually made its way to poor white people. Now, you still get the benefit of not having to deal with maybe being shut out of certain areas because of the color of your skin, etc. You don't have to deal with being hassled by the police just because. You don't have to deal with those kind of things. But it was never meant for it to be that way in the first place. So it all goes back to slavery. So you take away slavery, and a lot of these things don't happen. make sure you share this with a friend. All right. Smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're going to go to our final story here. And this one's pretty interesting. Got a little tense. Got a little yikes. So there's been a lot of debate and discussion about the wildfires in California. And some people are blaming, the climate, the dry conditions. Some people are pointing fingers at the firefighter, the fire chief. Some people are blaming DEI. Well, Crystal and Saagar had that debate. And it got a little tense. And after listening to this, I was saying to myself, well, maybe it's not one or the other. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Let's go ahead and get into this part right about here, because this is the first time I ever heard Crystal say, that's it, we're all fucked. Let's take a listen.
There are studies, for example, in Louisiana where they have major, there was the oil, I forget exactly, the facilities that were there. There's a good book about it, and I'm removing the name. The people there who were the most affected by the oil industry and others are the most Republican, because they are like, listen, at the end of the day, even though they're literally being poisoned by some of the things around them.
Because their livelihoods are tied to extraction.
But their point is that it's clear to me that the left, the Green New Deal, et cetera, wants to do away with my job, and I don't trust that they're going to do
because
anything
who told
for me,
them that? It wasn't the left that told them that. It was the right that told them that. It
so
was
you think that they're brainwashed, or they can think for themselves? I think
that they've looked at. I think they're right. I think they've looked at the failures of the government in the past and things like NAFTA to be able to deliver quality of life. But I mean, again, I'm not saying it's an easy problem. But how's the American way of life going in LA right now? How's the American way of life going in Asheville, North Carolina right now? How's the American way of life going in huge parts of the Gulf Coast that have been devastated by hurricanes and are going to be? How's the American way of life going in Miami, where when it rains, it just floods the whole city? So yeah, there would be a cost. There would be a transition period. But the consequences of not acting, you ignore the consequences of not acting.
Oh, I'm not ignoring.
And those are absolutely grave and dire. And instead, want to talk about there's a lesbian in charge of the fire department. Isn't that the real problem? No, it's not the real fucking problem.
Too, for the fact that we're talking about DEI itself, which has been pervaded through the California government. But beyond that, which is bringing it to a democratic question. People have been bombarded with propaganda since I was probably born that, everything is horrible, the sea levels are going to rise. Many of these predictions don't end up being true.
Yeah.
Let me pause there for a second. So this is where I think, I hear where both of them are coming from, but I think this point that Saagar made here, this is one of the criticisms. I don't say criticisms. I think some of the skeptics, this is something that they continue to say to me. They want to know why, if this climate issue is as important as I say it is, they want to know why have we been hearing about this our whole life? So when I was a kid, it was called global warming. We actually used to have an Earth Day event in elementary school, but they called it global warming at that point. And I guess somewhere along the way, they decided that that didn't sound too appealing. The world's getting hot. I don't think they liked it too much. So they decided to change it to climate change, which I guess they thought was more digestible for people. But I've heard about it, all my life. They've talked about the sea level and all those types of things. And I think that what some people may not understand is I don't think they were saying those changes were going to happen overnight. Even when I was a kid, I remember them saying this could happen in the future. We look forward 100 or 200 years from now, yada, yada. But at the same time, I think there are some of those that are, passionate about climate activism. There are some that have said, this is coming now. This is coming now, that type of thing. So I think the point that Saagar is making is that when you continue to tell people this is happening and this is going to happen over the years, and I'm assuming what Saagar's probably 30s or something, 30s or 40s, and it doesn't happen, people start to lose faith in these scientific predictions. I also agree with Crystal that a lot of it is people just don't trust what the government says. And you really can't blame them for that. you can't really blame people for questioning what the government is saying.
Which then no, but it's not, because people said, oh, X amount of coastline was going to disappear by, 2025, didn't happen. The same, catastrophic language is being used over and over again. People don't feel or see the fact that things are changing all that much beyond hurricanes and or fires. I think we should speak pragmatically. We can both accept that there will be more fire, more hurricane, et cetera, and say, okay, so what are we going to do about that? Well, we have to invest a lot more money in this and this. We don't necessarily need to say, oh, all electric cars are going to be driven in the state of California by 2030. Ridiculous, absurd, never going to happen in the first place. At the end of the day, it's about a consumptive mindset, which fundamentally, you're talking there about transition. That requires a lot of trust from people that their lives and their jobs and all this quote unquote just transition language was going to happen. I don't think there is any reason after the failures of COVID or after the last 5 years to say that would be competently managed, or it would be one in which we should, as a vision, buy into. We have probably one of the most atomized, individualistic times in modern American history. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and immigration being number one. But in all of that, you will not get to a point where everyone's just going to buy into this kumbaya, like, oh, I'm going to give up, 30% of my consumption for a quote unquote just transition.
So let me pause that for a second. I want to chime in about the electric vehicles. I want people to stop and people are going to take this the wrong way. I want people to stop referring to electric vehicles as if they are this ultimate solution. They're not. There are issues with electric vehicles as well, like the battery. Let's talk about where these rechargeable batteries come from and the labor that's put in behind that, right? We're talking about unpaid labor. And we've talked about this. We've talked about what's happening in the Congo, the cobalt that you need for those batteries. So this is why I continue to say there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. There just isn't. But that being said, everyone can't afford an electric vehicle either. So when you hear people to just make these claims that everyone just needs to buy an electric vehicle, with what money, honey? Are you going to give us these cars? With what money? So that's the other thing. Everyone can't afford to do that. And there aren't many of them that I've seen that are cheap. And even the cheap ones are too expensive for me. So it's just, I'm sorry. And I care about the environment. I care about the climate. But this idea that everyone can afford to just buy an electric vehicle is not realistic. And it's out of touch with people who are a part of the working class.
Not up.
No, I'm not.
You
because
are.
Donald Trump just won
You
the popular
completely
vote.
are. But
Who is against electric vehicle mandates?
Sorry. What I'm saying you're making up is the 30. You're going to have to reduce your consumption 30%. Blah blah blah.
Well, I think
maybe if you're one of an Elon Musk of the world, maybe that might require some sacrifice. But I mean, what you're basically saying is we can't solve any big collective
No, I'm not saying
problems
we
together.
can't solve it.
Just
I'm
give
saying
up.
we
cannot solve any big collective problem. We're too atomized. We're too individual. So forget about it. Just let her rip and hope that you're one of the people who can afford the private firefighters when it comes for your house, because that's the track that we're on right now. Is just basically every man for themselves. If you're rich, you can rebuild. If you're poor, sorry, you can't get home insurance, you're screwed. And, the fire department is being cut because billionaires don't want to pay taxes. So you're just basically have to pray that you and your loved ones are going to be able to make it.
Probably.
So that point there that Crystal brought up, it talks about, again, just how unethical this system is that we have in this country. This is what I've continued to bring up. This is why I say, all this, let me vote for this politician. At the end of the day, how much of that really matters when the donors are the ones that are calling the shots, when the billionaires are the ones that are calling the shots? And should we be focusing on going after the billionaire class and, targeting the companies in such a way where we're not supporting these companies that they're own? You're not going to be able to do it with everyone because that's almost impossible. But the point that Crystal is making there is that we just can't seem to come together on an issue because it seems like every issue is politically divided. And when you're talking about wildfires, a catastrophe. You're talking about like the climate. That should be something we should all be able to come together and help and move forward with, regardless of a political party. But it has gotten to the point in this country, and I've seen this happen over time, where even important issues that impact every single person in this country, we can't even work together on that because somehow, some way, it has become a. I didn't see the same type of divisiveness when George Bush Sr. was president. I still remember watching that debate. It was between him. I was a kid, but I went back and watched it again recently. It was him and Bill Clinton and Ross Perot. I still remember, right? So I didn't see this type of hostility. Even when it came to the issue of immigration, I noticed they were pretty chill about it, but said, yeah, I think you got a point there. I think you got a point there. But now everything is a political issue. Everything's divided politically. And when you divide every issue politically, we're really not paying as much attention on the billionaires that really control a lot of this stuff.
Look, I'm not defending billionaire tax levels, but don't they pay the most tax than anybody else in the state of California? I mean, that's what I'm talking about. This is a state with
what percent of their income do they pay in taxes?
Probably 5 to 7.
Next to nothing.
By the way, I'm not defending.
Elon Musk pays next to nothing in taxes.
I am not defending billionaire tax rates. What I'm saying is California is a G7 nation in and of itself. I think it would be G5 if it were its own independent country. So the idea it's not wealthy enough to handle this seems ridiculous to me. There are plenty of developed nations all across the world that seem to have a much better and more competent fire and hurricane disaster relief, Japan being one of them. My point is that it's clear within the context of mitigation itself, a lot more can be done. Democratically, if you want to continue to make the case for lack of consumption, etc., you can. I don't think it's going to work. I mean, I think the most honest discussion of climate change we ever had was who was the person who made the documentary with Michael Moore? I'm forgetting the name of it. And we talked a lot about it here over at Rising. We even interviewed him. And he was the most honest person because he's like, yeah, we have to radically cut consumption. I mean, actual quiet part out loud that came from most of the people who study carbon emissions, et cetera, was what was the single most important thing for drop of carbon emissions? It's when everybody stayed at home during COVID. That's the truth. Yeah. That's, if you actually wanted to see it, a dramatic cut. All of us have to stay at home, reduce our consumption, stay inside. People don't want to do that.
People also, there weren't as many bombs dropping during then either, Sagar. See, everybody keeps talking about reduction. Start driving an electric vehicle, recycle more, yada, yada. And all of those things help. Don't get me wrong. But as long as you're still dropping bombs, as long as we're still operating the military vehicles, which also are an issue when you talk about like the environment, as long as these wars are continuing, the climate change issue discussion is a non-starter. There are people still being affected by bombs that were dropped in their country years ago. People still, the air quality is shit. So I think what more people need to discuss is stopping these wars. See, that's the thing. Everybody wants to bring this back to electric vehicles, plastic straws, cardboard boxes, don't use plastic bagaroos, that type of stuff. And those things help. But as long as you're dropping bombs, it's not going to change. That's the issue. A lot of people don't want to touch that because then you'd have to criticize U.S. foreign policy decisions. That's a big one.
Live in a democratic society.
It just requires, I mean, first of all, renewable energy technology has improved dramatically. In particular, solar has improved dramatically.
Yes, but how is it made? It's made in China from filthy, materials. It has a ton of emissions. The lifetime offset of a solar panel in the United States will never offset the amount that it requires to make it. This is the problem. Like, we want to make these windmills, which again are not efficient. They have 10 to 25% carrying. The most efficient power that we have is called nuclear power. Nobody wants to build it. Everyone's too afraid.
That's not true either. I mean, even the climate left has embraced nuclear. Like Greta has
great. When's the next reactor coming
nuclear?
On? It's not going to happen.
Again, Sagar, okay, so the way things are is just how they're going to be. That's your position.
No,
and I just find that really, look, you might be right, but I have to say what I think would make a better situation where we don't have to constantly be, watching people tearfully talk about how all their possessions are lost and they've had to flee the home that they've lived in for decades and decades, and where parts of the country are just increasingly uninhabitable and where you can't be insured, and where, the only people who have a prayer of surviving in a reasonable fashion are the wealthy who can pay for the private firefighters and, rebuild even if they don't have homeowners insurance. You might be right that we're too far gone to be able to deal with it. We certainly have not dealt with it to this point. But it's just not true that the technology doesn't exist. The technology does exist. What doesn't exist is the will to actually have the collective action required to try to tackle this problem in a serious way, which you're right.
But in order for that to happen, in order for us to tackle this problem in a serious way, that would mean that we would have to work with all world leaders. This isn't something that's just going to affect the United States. I know we're talking about California wildfires right now, but the reality is it will have an impact on the entire world. So that means that the United States government has to get, has to throw aside the animosity they have against China. That would mean that the United States government would have to stop fear-mongering people about Russia. That would mean that the U.S. government would have to be willing to work with other world leaders, which they have made it very clear that they don't really want to do, especially when it comes to China and Russia. That would mean everybody would have to be willing to work together. There's that. Two, that means we can't be divided politically, particularly in this country, in order for people, there would have to be some type of bipartisanship, which don't really seem to be happening unless it's Israel. So you see what I mean? There's a number of things that need to happen and need to take place. And we have to ask ourselves, what do we want as a better society? California isn't immune to wildfires. So knowing that, why hasn't the leadership in California taken proactive measures to prepare for the next one? Anybody? Bueller? Why hasn't the leadership in California, after all these years of wildfires, why haven't they prepped for the next big one? Why are we back here again? Something to think about, folks. We'll go on a little bit more here, and then I want to get to what she says at the end.
Right, at this point, we require a lot of mitigation, but also, rather than just letting it rip and see what happens when it's 2 degrees Celsius and when it's 5 degrees Celsius, to actually try to, get the trends under control, because we do have the technology now to be able to
I think we do.
that.
We've had the technology since 1970. It's called a nuclear reactor. And let me not let people off the hook. Here's the truth. When you actually want to build a nuclear reactor, I don't want that in my neighborhood. It's too unsafe and all this. And so what happens? We use bullshit, zoning regulations to keep it out. And we haven't built a new reactor in the United States since 1976. It's great that elites, people and others are talking about how good it is. In practice, if the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission greenlit a reactor tomorrow, it would still probably take a decade before we were able to buy it. The story out of Georgia is extremely blackpilling for both how much it costs, for the number of community pushback. I feel like there is a democratic check on what is real and what is not. I would love to see 1,500 reactors across this country. And then you can have as much AI, electric car, and all of that as you want. We don't have to burn a single, we don't have to have any oil, natural gas, etc. It will not happen because I know, you can see even today, this boomer fear of the reactor is everywhere.
The platform you.
But people have been killed before in the past. I think, if I remember correctly, 3 Mile Island. I remember Diane Sayre said no one died. That actually wasn't true. I Googled that when she was on the show. I was like, no, people did die. 3 Mile Island. It wasn't a lot of people. So I do understand why people have some concern about nuclear. But again, the reality is you're gonna have to come up with something somewhere, right? We're gonna have to figure things out. And I remember when I was growing up, when I was in school, they taught us that there were renewable and non-renewable resources. And we knew that back then. And I feel like even back then, this country, we should have been preparing for moving towards a different type of energy system, especially for the resources that are non-renewable. Like we always knew this was a thing. But But I do think that we rely too heavily on those particular resources. Let's go on a little bit more.
Oh, I do. Nobody's been more pro-nuclear
to advocate for that rather than just dismiss it as like, well, it's not going to happen. So let's talk about
nobody
DEI.
been more pro-nuclear than I have. I've been putting it out there, but I've also watched with trepidation and with reality about how even Diablo Canyon, you know, bringing back on that was a titanic fight in the state of California. About how in Germany, sure, it's great, Greta said it. Well, most of the reactors are going offline. They're still burning more coal or burning Russian natural gas. Even Japan, the country I love, even the fact they had one nuclear disaster where not a single person was killed, and they basically took off a huge percentage of theirs because people are afraid. It's like dealing with this is just so maddening, because the truth is that the actual democratic check on this stuff, what I was talking about with oil or with nuclear, many people are either afraid, they can have all the facts that they want, they're just not going to listen. And in the meantime, you know, we also have all these issues that we have to deal with. But the solutions, while they may be easy and staring us in the face, actually convincing people of that, I have not seen a correct playbook for it,
So,
both
Sagar,
on nuclear or climate or any of this.
Your ideal, like if you could just Sagar gets to run the world.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Your
There'd be no
ideal
weed.
would be to tackle climate change using nuclear energy.
Well, I think that at a certain point, things are mostly far gone at this point. A lot of it is going to be mitigation to the extent that we can reduce further carbon emissions. I would build 1,500 nuclear reactors tomorrow across the entire United States, fulfill Richard Nixon's vision of 1,000 nuclear reactors at a minimum, greenlight this, have abundant electrical power in which Americans don't have to worry about their power bills. We could build as much as we want. All the AI people can hook up to the grid. If you want an electric car, you can drive it, and we would have dramatically less carbon emissions. That is an abundant future, but I'm realistic too. I don't think it's going to happen.
But again, I feel like the focus should be on ending these wars, like all of the pollution damage that is done from that. Now we fast forward towards the end, and this is when, you know, Crystal did not look happy in this segment at all. This is when she kind of has a realization moment. Listen to this.
I absolutely agree that politically it seems very unlikely. And in fact, I feel pretty like I think we're all pretty much fucked, if I'm being totally honest. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop like advocating for what I think would be a better direction.
I don't think that we're all quote unquote fucked. Like we live in the richest country in the history of humanity. Like
we live in the richest country in the history of humanity, who chooses to use that money in ways that don't really help us here at home, that has a bloated defense budget and doesn't want to give everybody healthcare, you know? So it's stuff like that. So just because you live in a wealthy country doesn't mean that the resources are being allocated in that country in such a way that the people who live there really do benefit from it. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have in the United States of America. Like, that's the thing. But that was the first time I ever heard Crystal say we're basically, you know, we're all basically fucked. And part of that is because of the political division. And there's going to come a time, and I don't know if it'll happen during my lifetime or not, but there's going to come a time in this country where I feel in order to get something done, and it may not even be the climate issue, but in order to get something done, we're going to have to work with people that are in a different political ideology as us. I really do believe it's going to happen at some point where we're going to have to cross that line. And sometimes I feel like Congress is a distraction. I talk about them because they are the ones that are, you know, passing legislation, and you do need to know about what is passing and that type of thing. But I also feel like it's a distraction from the people that we really should be going after, which is the billionaire class. I mean, the people who own so much, the people who exploit the workers, the people who basically also own the politicians. The feuds that happen within Congress are a distraction because they keep us from paying attention to the people that have immense power that Congress answers to. And I think that as long as we continue to say, you're on team red, I'm on team blue, I don't understand how we're going to solve some of these problems. January 21st, I am going to host a panel on this show. It's called Left Meets Right. I already got the peoples. And we're going to have this conversation to see where are their points of agreement. Because I do feel like until we get past like the red-blue division, I don't really see how we're going to solve a lot of things in this country. And I watch every presidential administration become more rabid than the previous one, right? Like, I mean, it was one thing, like Obama came in, and after Obama, and then actually a lot of this started with Obama. But I mean, like going forward, like it's crazy. Like people say you got MAGA, but you also got blue MAGA too. And the way that people have spoken to those of us like myself who didn't want to support either one of these presidential candidates and voted third party, it just shows me that like we have so much work to do. And as long as we are still divided by red team and blue team, I don't really see some of these things getting solved. I'm just going to be honest with you, because that means you may have to cross the aisle. Why aren't these people working together to solve shit? Why aren't they doing that? Why aren't these politicians, if they want what's best for this country, why aren't they working together to make things better for Americans in this country? And I think that's the question people needs to, like, you need to ask that to your representatives. And I think I'll just end this part here.
We will figure it out. And like,
not figuring it out.
No, but okay. But
I mean, you're the one who just said we can't do anything, and we have
No,
no
but
ability to
I
act
also have
collectively or
some-
solve big problems. And I think you're probably
I'm
right
sure
about
you'll
that.
find this anathema, but I do have some, actual confidence in the free market and innovation. People in Thomas Malthus's time said, "Oh, the population collapse." Remember, what was it, the 1960s book about population bomb? Totally fake. The invention of GMO and a fertilizer product had made it to carrying capacity of Earth is now, what are we at, 7-something?
But as long as one side doesn't believe what the other side is saying, as long as Democrats say Republicans, everything you're saying is wrong, as long as Republicans say to Democrats, everything you're saying is wrong, how are we going to solve any of these issues? That's something to think about, folks. All right. We are going to do call in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to take a quick break like I usually do. I'll be back and we'll go into the call in segment. And Eric, I think we do have super chats, but I'll be right back.
There we go. I said we can talk about how we fix all this and call in, right? All right. This is the part of the show where we give Sabby a little break before we'll be transitioning to the Zoom Hangout, formerly that we used to call in. Sorry, just adjusting a little something here. And yeah, call-ins where we get to hear from you. And yeah, so it's a Zoom Hangout. Sabby's creating the room. We'll be giving you the link as soon as that's available. And cameras are optional, but happy to if you want to have your camera on or off, it's fine. And yeah, we want to hear from you. You can talk about things we talked about on the show. We can talk about other things. And in the meanwhile, during the break, I'm going to say a couple things, read some super chats. We have some of those built up before we transition over. Yeah, I mean, I was struck, I mean, by, Crystal and Sagar. And of course, Sagar just sounds like, I said in the chat, like he sounds old as, what, some of the times where he talks about all this stuff. But yeah, Crystal getting, despondent. And I think it's because she's operating in a politics that is constrained, and it's constrained by this whole red, blue, Democrat, Republican game. And I think the real left politics that I think we're trying to push around these parts is that it's a uniparty, right? Both these parties are the same. Both these parties are corrupt and serve the billionaire class, and they serve them, unquestioningly and ruthlessly. They will literally kill us all to let the billionaires have a better quarter. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. And so whenever it's about interest, right? There's the interest of that top 0.1% billionaire class, and there's the interest of the 99%. And right now we have a Congress that lock, stock, and barrel represents that billionaire class, that top 1%. They are corrupt. Like we can't say that enough. So I talk about, the acronym MCDS, money, corruption, demands, and solutions. They are, completely corrupt. I mean, that's the whole Congress. They need to be replaced by people that really represent the 99%, and getting rid of that corruption needs to be our demand. Sagar was talking about nuclear, and the thing is, like, I think you can sidestep the whole nuclear argument if you just make the point that even if nuclear is viable and is a good answer, our current government is too corrupt to do nuclear safely. So until we get rid of that corruption to the amount that we can have a nuclear power regulator, it's like it's not even worth talking about. Anyways, I'm jabbering too much. And we got chats built up. So let's see what we got in the chat queue. Thanks for the super chat. And these go back to the previous segment too. Thanks, the progressive lefty, who says, I didn't have Trump stopping the genocide on my bingo card. Yeah, that's something. I mean, my theory about that is that it's kind of, from Israel's point of view, it's kind of run its course, and everybody is kind of ready to say they're wrapping it up, but they're really just moving it into the next phase of oppression and the land grab is, my theory of kind of what's happening. It's not even so much that there's a real ceasefire and things are going to improve in Gaza. I think it's more like a rebranding is what, Trump and even Bibi are looking to do. Thanks for this one. Satra says, read Neely Fuller Jr., The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism and white supremacy. Thanks for that one. Thanks, Unemployed Scholar, saying slavery, convict leasing, and then mass incarceration. Yeah, talking about, connecting to that very effective video that Sabby played. And we got this one from Yatra Mandela, who's been a member for 1 month, who says this was a very well made and informed video of American truth, more specifically Black American truth. And thanks for this one, Gamble, who says status quo doesn't change, only the machinations. Thank you for the super stickers, Songs of the People. And Kevin Wayne says, China's EVs are just fine. It beats out Tesla. I mean, yeah, there is, see what EVs do in general, in my opinion, is they kind of open things up in that if you have more EVs, you're not just directly tied to fossil fuels. Right now, this whole massive millions and millions large fleet of consumer gas cars make it so it's just tied to oil. And so as long as all these gas cars are around, we got to keep pulling oil out of the ground. If you have electric vehicles, it doesn't necessarily solve everything in one go, but it definitely opens things up. You can, potentially match those electric cars with solar grids, with other renewable energy projects. Heck, if you like nuclear, you can match them up with nuclear. And it just opens things up so that we can change how the power and electric and energy system works. Whereas right now, with all these gas cars and gas vehicles, like we're just tied to it, and we can go nowhere as long as that's the case. Thanks for this one, Unemployed Scholar. It says, basically, the whole Eastern Hemisphere is placed under the Asian label for income tracking purposes. That includes over 25 different nationalities. And also, thanks for this one. It says, Filipinos aren't truly Asian in Los Angeles because incarcerated Filipinos are fighting the fires along with Black and Mexican. And thanks for the super chat. I know myself. China just announced a 14K electric car. Game over. Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be game over if they can get them here. I mean, part of the game that our billionaire-controlled Congress and presidency and and the billionaires are connected in with the energy companies. It's all of a piece, and part of this whole thing of with China and whatnot is to do things like prevent those cars from being sold here, because that, of course, will hurt the sale of the cars and the automakers that they like. So I'd like to see cheap electrics come here, and it's a good demand, put it that way, that these types of demands we need to start having. Thanks, Kevin Wayne. Have Jerry's take on China on your show. He'd shoot Sagar down. And thanks for the super chat, Curious Cosmonaut, who says, Sabby, your sweater is awesome. And Sabby and Sparky giving his love to Sabby. Thanks for the super chat. And we had a new member, McCoy Perry. Welcome. We like new members. And thanks also for this one, Unemployed Scholar. The people of the Pacific reject nuclear. And one other thing I wanted to say about climate change when we were talking about that too is that a lot of the things that we would do for, like, there are all these things we should do for climate change, like reducing the fossil fuels, reducing factory emissions and whatnot. Even if you don't believe any of the climate change things, any of the climate change theories, it's still, these are things we should really be doing in any case for issues like smog and urban smog and things like, and just air quality. A lot of these things, that's reason enough to do them. And, getting all caught up in it as a climate change thing is, there's plenty of reasons. Thanks for this super chat. Debbie Nash says, Sabs, you're on fire tonight. Go. I think she meant, but thanks. And one last on the YouTube super chats. Sparky says, anytime someone says Israel is our only friend in the Middle East, I can't help but think before Israel, we had no enemies in the Middle East. Quoting U.S. missionary John Sheehan. Thanks for that, and thanks for those. And we got some Rockfin here. Let me see if I can make that show up the right way. There we go. You want to read Roger's Rockfin?
All right. Thank you, Roger. Sabrina, I don't know how far you got up into the ACA Philip Randolph book, but that was one of the main drivers behind forming the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, because George Pullman of Pullman Sleeping Cars, because porters were not unionized. Yes, I got to that part. Most had poor working conditions and were underpaid, requesting an investigation of Pullman rates, porter wages, tipping practices, and other matters related to wages and working conditions. The Interstate Commerce Commission ruled that it did not have jurisdiction. Sabrina, when you finish that book, you've got to give us a report on what you've learned. The viewers expect a full report on what you've learned first thing on your desk. LOL. Yeah, no, I plan to do that with that book. That book is really good. So definitely. Okay, we are going to head on over to call in. So Sabby After Dark, the link is pinned at the top of the chat. And let me go ahead and open the Zoom room while I'm here. It's via Zoom. The way it works, if you're new, if you want to speak, you just raise your hand via Zoom. So you will see an option to do that. At the bottom, it says participants, chats, reaction. Then it says raise your hand. That's how I know if you want to talk. Most people who are not new, they know how this works. So, but the link is pinned there at the top of the chat. And then all I ask is that when you join in, just make sure that you mute yourself. And then I'll call on everyone based on who raised their hand. Pinned at the top of the chat. If you join the show right after, I ask that you just go to sabbysabs2.com and you'll be able to get that Zoom link and that passcode as well. Although
you can make me co-host.
Yeah, let's make you co-host.
Yeah, sabbysabs2.com is the easy way. Get in. It looks like it is working.
All right, let me go ahead and make you co-host. Great. And then there we go. Okay, good. We got people coming in, hands raised. All right, again, if you want that link, it's sabbysabs2.com.
See you in there.
And we will see you over there on Call-In, guys. So Call-In's fun. You get to talk about, whatever you want. People usually talk about the stories we discussed. I'll see you guys over there. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.